Random House Audiobooks presents After the Fall by Suzanne Somers. Read for you by the author.
After the fall, how I picked myself up, dusted myself off, and started all over again. What could be worse than losing the #1 television show in America? Not losing it. That's right. Had I continued playing Chrissy Snow on Three's Company, the humongous hit TV show, I would not be the Suzanne I am today, and that's a person I'm happy to be. I had been moving full speed in America's fast lane. Life was great. Nothing could stop me now, I thought. Money was plentiful. Work was coming at me like bullets on an artillery range. I could pick and choose. I was dancing in the big time. People called me Miss Somers. Crowded restaurants magically had the best table available. Theater tickets were no problem either, nor were hotel reservations or hair appointments. Crowded doctors' offices would always fit me in for an appointment when it was convenient for me. There was no waiting in lines for movies or sitting in crowded airport lounges. I no longer even needed to carry a purse. Somehow, somewhere, magically, someone would appear to take care of my needs. I didn't ask for any of this special treatment. It just came to me. Then one day, while my life was speeding along that highway, someone opened the back door of the car and kicked me out. Suddenly, I found myself sitting on the side of the road all alone, watching a cloud of dust as the car sped on without me. As quickly as it all came, it was over. I was no longer America's darling. Suddenly, I was no longer on the #1 television show in the country, so I wasn't bringing in any profits. And when you don't bring in profits, the door slams shut. The friends I had made along the way were suddenly too busy to see me. The open doors of the network executives closed in my face. The party invitations dried up. I had not understood that the invitations, the champagne, the scripts, the dinner invites, the open doors, and the friends were about business. This is the way it's done in Hollywood. The line between business and friendship is deliberately blurred. The pros, the ones who endure, understand this. It's the naive ones like myself, the new hot one on the block who get it confused and take it personally. Today, 20 years later, I'm grateful. I really am. If I hadn't lost everything, I never would have had to do the work to bring myself back. I'm not talking about success anymore, although that came with it. I'm talking about the emotional work that helped me find the self-esteem to be the person I am today. It's an ongoing journey that has brought and continues to bring me peace of mind, serenity, and happiness with myself and the new life I have created. As always, to explain where I am today, it's necessary to tell you the story of where I've been. "Put your heads between your knees," the pilot screamed. "We're going to try to make a landing in the water." 2 island ladies sitting across from us started wailing, "Oh Lord, we're going to die! Oh Lord, we're going to die!" I could see the black waters of the Caribbean approaching closer and closer out the window of our small twin-engine Fairchild. The engines labored against the hurricane-force winds. Bam! Another air pocket. We dropped hundreds of feet once again. "Oh God," I yelled. The screams of the 18 petrified passengers pierced the blackness of the night. I don't want my life to be over, I thought. My poor little boy, Bruce, was expecting me to be home that night. He had been staying at my parents' house while Alan and I were on vacation. I knew Bruce was anxious to get back to his own room in our house and away from his grandfather's drunken, violent mood swings. The cabin was illuminated once again. Lightning was all around us. Rain poured in slanted sheets against the flimsy windows of our small plane. "I love you, Alan," I said through tears. "I've never felt this way about anyone in my life. I don't want it to be over." "I love you too, Suzanne," Alan said softly. The plane jerked violently. Alan put his arm around my back protectively while our heads rested between our knees in crash position. We're going down, the pilot yelled through his microphone. The plane was descending. It was out of control. The winds bouncing our little craft like a kickball. I prepared for the worst. Alan's hand wrapped around mine, stopping the blood from flowing. The numbness in my fingers mirrored my fear. To believe you are about to die stops all feeling. You just wait for the inevitable. Then bang! Bong! We hit ground. Ground. Ground, not water. We made it. We were alive. Bruce would have a mother. Alan and I would have a life together. We hugged each other tearfully. We had made it through one of the worst storms in the history of the Caribbean. We had been spared. The next day, January 2nd, 1977, exactly one day after surviving that near-fatal plane crash, I returned to Los Angeles via San Francisco to get Bruce and received a phone call from my manager, Bonnie. She said in her side-of-the-mouth, Runyon-esque way, "Listen, I got a call from ABC for a new show they're doing called Three's Company, and they seem really interested in you." "I don't know," I said reluctantly. "I almost died last night, and I've been doing a lot of thinking. I just can't do this anymore." "What do you mean you almost died last night?" "Oh, it was terrible," I told her. "It was the first time it had snowed in the Bahamas in 50 years. Our small plane was struck by lightning and was damaged. Coming that close to death got me thinking. I didn't sleep at all last night. I kept asking myself, what am I doing with my life? My career is stuck. I'm weary from the constant rejection. They tell me I'm either too short, too tall, not funny enough, too busty, or not busty enough. All I hear is what I'm not. Let's just give it up, okay? I'm not going to make it in this business. I've been going after an impossible dream." "Well, maybe you'll live for a reason," Bonnie said thoughtfully. "Maybe God has big plans for you, Suzanne. Don't give up now. We've worked so hard, and I swear they seem really interested. Why don't you try one more time?" "All right," I sighed. "One last time, and then that's it, okay?" I put the phone down and began the routine. Bruce was at school, so I had plenty of time to go to the interview and be back before he got home. I washed my long blonde hair and put on a little makeup. I jumped into my Chevy Vega and drove to Century City, the West Coast headquarters of ABC Television. Normally, I would have been extremely nervous walking into such an intimidating situation, but compared to what I experienced the night before, this was nothing. Fred Silverman was a middle-aged guy with a round face and intense blue eyes. He gave off powerful and impatient vibes, kind of scary, but at the same time impressive. I could tell he was in charge, and I found that trait appealing. He was sitting at a big desk in an even bigger windowed office that overlooked Century City. The room was filled with what looked like a sea of gray suits. I don't know, maybe 20 men, all seemingly dressed alike. A young brunette woman was sitting on the couch. She was dressed casually in contrast to the severity of the others. I wondered who she was. Fred was smiling, no one else was. This was serious business. A lot was at stake for the network. Their new show, Three's Company, had been given a green light if they could find the right blonde to complete the trio. They had already hired Joyce DeWitt and John Ritter to star. 2 pilots had already been done with 2 other blonde actresses, but the chemistry wasn't right. "This is Joyce DeWitt," I was told. "She'll be playing Janet." "Ah, so that's who she is," I thought. Joyce was calm and had a lot of confidence, and I wondered how she had gotten like that. Joyce and I read 2 pages, then another 3 pages. The room laughed, but only if Fred laughed. Fred would go, "Ha, ha, ha," and then the sea of gray suits would go, "Ha, ha, ha." This is weird, I thought. I had no experience in the business, so I didn't realize that millions of dollars were at stake. "Well, thank you very much," Fred said to me, and I knew I was dismissed. I'd been through so many tryouts, seemingly hundreds over the last several years, that I never really expected to get the job. Today was probably no different, I thought, which was fine with me. I wanted to move on and make a change in my life. I hoped I could figure out how to develop a regular cooking school in my home that, in time, could work itself into something not only lucrative but enjoyable and creative as well. I actually felt great that I had something new to focus on. The constant rejection of auditions had become almost intolerable. I was preoccupied when I walked in the front door of the apartment I shared with my then-boyfriend Alan Hamill and my son Bruce, who was 11 years old. Alan and I had been in love for 8 years. In 1977, I had moved to Los Angeles from Sausalito to be with him. There were no guarantees of marriage, but there was a sincere desire to try to make it as a couple. Times were tough. I was having financial difficulties from lack of work, and Alan was trying to bounce back financially from his divorce and dealing with all the confused feelings that came from sharing his life with my son, while his 2 children lived in his former home with his ex-wife. All 3 of our children were anxious and upset. My son did not like sharing me with Alan after having had me all to himself. Alan was having a hard time warming up to Bruce out of the guilt of not living with his own kids. I loved Alan and was willing to do whatever was necessary to spend my life with him, but I was aware we had a lot of problems to sort out if we were going to mend the hurt that swirled around us. I had never in my life met a man like Alan Hamill. From that first moment in December 1968 at the KGO studios in San Francisco, it was as though an electric charge went through my body. He was hosting a national television show for ABC called The Anniversary Game, and I had been hired for a day as a prize model. In an instant, I knew I had to be with Alan, if only one time, just to know I had experienced merging with another so completely. That is the power of kindred souls. As a person, I felt emotionally supported by Alan in a way I had never experienced before. He became my lover and my mentor. His thinking was not clouded with limitations. Long before it was popular, he thought that anything in life is possible if you believe in yourself. Alan was somehow sent to teach me to believe in myself, which was no small achievement. My childhood had left me damaged, with no sense of self-worth. My love affair with Alan was the central focus of my life. I was constantly juggling my mothering of Bruce with my passion for Alan. The other few men in my life prior to Alan always took a back seat to my mothering responsibilities. Except for one brief relationship when Bruce was a toddler, no man was ever asked to spend time in my home because of Bruce, nor did I ever date until after Bruce's bedtime. Our home belonged to Bruce and me. We were each other's worlds. My childhood family did not fit into this life of my making either. I felt judged by them, real or imagined, that they perceived my getting pregnant before marriage was a problem I had created for myself, which was true, and now I would have to live with the consequences and figure it out. The exception was my mother, who has always been my connection to safety. I had moved away from my hometown of San Bruno, California in 1964, mainly to stop feeling the judgment and the whispers of the locals. I had married my boyfriend, Bruce Somers, when I was 18 and pregnant. In the 2 short years we were married, I was miserable and blamed him for our predicament. I felt that for both of us, youth had been cut short and our individual dreams would never be realized. What had been fun as girlfriend and boyfriend was now a new life of responsibility we were not yet ready to assume. We had no money, so paying the rent and putting food on the table kept us both in a constant state of panic, hardly conducive to starting a life together. Bruce was a nice guy with an easy laugh. He excelled academically and had dreams of becoming a lawyer when he finished his studies at the University of San Francisco. He was 2 years older than me, but his 20 years were not sufficient to prepare him for fatherhood and marriage. 2 years after Bruce and I were married, we divorced. Once again, I was the subject of scandal, first having to get married because I was pregnant, and now getting divorced. But the union had been so wrong that we both felt it was better to get out now rather than later. I was the first person I knew who was divorced. It just wasn't done at that time. It was 1967, which is an eternity ago by today's behavioral standards. I walked away from the gossip and the judgment to begin again and moved with my son across the bay to Sausalito. Life is not easy for a young divorcee with a child and no support system, financial or emotional. At times I felt deep despair and loneliness, but every morning the shining face of my adorable child would look into mine and give me the strength to get through another day. I'd never had a friend like my son Bruce. It was a relationship without complications, founded on unconditional love. Had I not been financially destitute, I truly would not have needed anything else in my life. I foraged for work to pay for the necessities and somehow eked out a living by modeling for small-time accounts. Then one day, without warning, I found myself locked eye to eye with Alan Hamill. Now my focus was divided between the 2 greatest love affairs imaginable. Both wanted all of me, and in that the struggle began. Alan was married, but the marriage was coming to an end. He and his wife had drifted apart over the years because of Alan's traveling and long absences. His children were a big part of his reason for staying. He had been able to coast in the relationship because he had never been seriously emotionally involved with another woman, and returning home to the excited faces of his kids, he said, made living this way worthwhile. Things are fine the way they are. It would be no different even if I were divorced, he kept explaining, hoping I would find this arrangement agreeable so he would not be forced to make difficult changes. I was not evolved yet as a woman and had not even considered the immorality of my participation in this union with Alan. Had I been an accountable person at this time, I would have insisted our relationship be put on hold until his marriage was officially over. But I didn't. To avoid taking the next step, Alan protected his feelings by denying the fact that my life included my son. If he could deny Bruce's inconvenient existence, Alan could protect himself emotionally, so he had no interest in knowing Bruce on any level. I was sure I had no future with Alan, so I kept the 2 separate, never forcing them to acknowledge each other. I loved Alan so much that to have him on these terms was better than not having him at all. In the darkness of my lonely nights, I was filled with guilt. It was wrong, yet I couldn't stop. It was beyond sex. It was a feeling of being comfortable with him, as though we had known each other all our lives. I couldn't, and wouldn't, ask him to change his life for fear I would drive him away. For 3 years we lived this way, Alan with his double life, Bruce and I with our private lives, and Alan and I with our love affair. 3 distinct and completely separate lives that never crossed over their invisible barriers. Then one day Alan told me he was ending his marriage officially. I had never asked him to, and had not expected it. Suddenly there was a future. I allowed myself to dream of Alan, Bruce, Alan's children, Leslie and Stephen, and me as one big happy family. I knew this would take a lot of work, but we could do it. It was my dream. In my naivete, I thought we'd be able to smoothly roll over to the next phase. I had not counted on the children's right to object. They didn't want new parents, nor could they see where they fit into our passionate twosome. We each threatened the other's children by our very existence. But relationships are about steps, and this was the next inevitable step, like it or not. We were parents, and our children were integral parts of our lives. When I first met Alan's daughter, Leslie, who was 4 years older than my son, I felt as though I was being inspected at a meat market. She did not smile, but instead looked at me warily and suspiciously. Somewhere in that moment, I imagine she must have decided that no one was going to make her feel anything she did not want to feel. Leslie was born into an idyllic life. As a child, she was a free spirit, a very happy baby with a great sense of humor. She lived with her parents and her nanny in a beautiful old Victorian mansion in Rosedale, the best address in the heart of Toronto. It was a life surrounded by loving grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins, all of whom described her glowingly as smart as a whip, unique, adorable, lovable, and incredibly artistic and creative. When she was 3, Leslie's brother Stephen was born. He was a gentle child, much less outgoing than Leslie, but like his sister he was artistically inclined, encouraged by their mother, herself an outstanding artist. This happy life continued until Stephen was 6 years old and Leslie was 9. It was then that Alan decided to move his family to California. He had been wanting to move to Los Angeles for several years. It was a choice that was to change his family dynamics forever. Los Angeles is so different from Toronto. For the same price as Alan's Rosedale mansion, he was able to find a typical California home in a middle-class neighborhood. It was nice, but hardly comparable to the elegance and grandeur of the house they had left behind. Alan and his wife were growing further and further apart, and Leslie and Stephen were feeling the tension in the house. They were starting to act out and rebel. When Daddy was home, there was this strained silence between their once loving parents. Stephen and Leslie were too young to fathom the meaning of what was happening, yet sensitive enough to know it wasn't something good. To confront their reality would bring about change, and change was overwhelming to entertain. By the time I came into the picture in 1968, my impression of Alan's marriage was one of 2 people under one roof living separate lives. Knowing this helped to ease my guilt, but I was grateful when his marriage dissolved officially. After Alan and I decided to try living together, our difficulties began. For the first time in our relationship, we were arguing a lot. We weren't used to the daily drudgery of rent, bills, and groceries. The child support payments I needed to help support Bruce never came, and I received no alimony. I couldn't find work, and Alan was trying to start a new career in America. We took our frustration out on each other. I guess you do always hurt the one you love. From observing Alan's behavior with others over the years, I knew he was a very controlling person, but I never realized just how controlling until we shared a home. He wanted me to do everything his way. I had recently ended 3.5 years of life-saving therapy sessions that had helped me understand my childhood and its effects on me. But now, living with Alan and watching him ignore my son set me back emotionally. I didn't know how to deal with the situation. When Alan and I would fight, I would run to Bruce's room and sequester myself. Alan denied Bruce's existence to the degree that he rarely set foot in the door of Bruce's room unless Stephen was visiting and the 2 boys were playing together. But running to Bruce as my confidant created a new dynamic for both of us. In my pain, Bruce became my protector, which was too much pressure for a small boy. I was lonely, I needed a shoulder to cry on. And Bruce felt happy to be able to provide that comfort, but it created false hopes for him. It opened up his thinking. Perhaps Mom will leave Alan, and then we can go back to our previous normal lives. Each time Alan and I made up became a disappointment for Bruce. But what could he say? He just stuffed the feeling down with all the rest of these new thoughts, presuming eventually it would all go away. I was experiencing familiar feelings and depression. I had allowed the chaos of my childhood to follow me into my adult life. If Alan was happy, I was happy. If Alan was upset, I was upset. If Bruce was sad, so was I. If Leslie and Stephen felt threatened, so did I. I thought I had entered this part of my life well. I thought I was all healed. Why did I feel like such a mess? I was losing me again. I didn't realize that control was the issue. I wanted equality, equally shared power in my relationship with Alan. It is so easy to look back and see it with clarity today, but when you are living inside the vortex of a storm, it's very difficult to find your way out. Back home, after my interview with Fred Silverman, I washed the makeup from my interview face back to my usual everyday shiny, clean skin. I put on my favorite faded Levi's and a t-shirt. Bruce would be home from school soon, and I was looking forward to walking down to the beach with him. I'd actually almost forgotten about the auditions at ABC. But as I was hanging up the blouse I had worn to the audition, the phone started ringing. "Hello," I said calmly. Oh my God, Bonnie screamed through the receiver. You got it! For a moment, I couldn't figure out what she was talking about. Then comprehension sank in. I was speechless. It was beyond my wildest dreams, and there was no way, at that moment, I could ever have known that the course of my life would be changed forever. The oncoming weeks were a frenzy of publicity photos, wardrobe fittings, interviews, and rehearsals. There was a buzz in the TV industry about Three's Company. For the era, this program was considered racy. The show was about two girls and a guy sharing an apartment. Joyce DeWitt played Janet Wood, who worked in a florist shop, and I played Chrissy Snow, an office typist secretary. The two girls shared an apartment together until they had a party one night. Upon awakening the next morning, they found Jack Tripper, a student chef, played by John Ritter, asleep in the bathtub. Because they had an extra bedroom they weren't using, and they liked the idea of additional help with the rent, they agreed to let Jack move in. The girls told the landlord that Jack was gay, so the landlord wouldn't be upset. Therein lay the premise for Three's Company. I was starting to understand why everyone had been so nervous that day in Fred Silverman's office. The show was due to start production, and they had been short one star. Star. What a strange new identity. I had done nothing to deserve it, yet all the magazines were asking my opinion and calling me Miss Somers. It was pretty hard to feel worthy of all the attention. But this new life was a great distraction from the personal problems Alan and I were having with blending our families. Alan was genuinely happy for me. Jealousy is not one of his traits. "You're going to be so great in this part," he kept saying. He had been in the entertainment business for many years and continually encouraged me in the beginning weeks to calm my overworked nerves. In retrospect, I can see that this new development in my life was very hard on Bruce. Not only was he having to share me with Alan, but now he would also have to share with my new active career. Being my darling boy, he kept his happy face and pretended everything was okay in order to make it easier for me. The price for pretending would have to be paid later, but for now, I thought things were good for him. The first pickup for Three's Company was only 6 episodes because it was a mid-season replacement, but we were practically assured of a full pickup of 24 episodes starting in the fall of 1977 because of our sensational ratings. Nevertheless, I worried that if somehow something went wrong, I would lose this incredible momentum. I had been paying attention to the successes of Jay Bernstein, the famed publicist-turned-manager who had catapulted Farrah Fawcett from a spokeswoman for toothpaste into an icon adored by fans all over the world. I felt that if I could hire Jay to be my publicist, he could use the success of Three's Company to get me publicity. The only problem was that Jay's fee was $2,500 a month, and I really couldn't afford it. "I'll make you a deal," I said nervously to Jay at our first meeting in his office. "I will give you all the money I'm making for this series, which is $2,750 a week for the entire first 6 weeks of the series, except for my manager's fee, which goes to Bonnie. In return, I'd like you to make sure that people know who I am. If for some reason this show doesn't make it, I want to be visible enough to use this opportunity to get my next job." It meant Jay would begin working for me during the summer months that bridged the gap between the first 6 episodes and the start of the fall season. I turned over all 6 paychecks to him, knowing I was gambling with the only big money, by my financial standards anyway, that I had ever made, but it was worth it to me. It was my first, and maybe only, big chance. Jay had magic. He was a publicity genius. In retrospect, a big part of my splash onto the scene was Jay's ability to manipulate the media. Three's Company went on the air Tuesday night, March 15th, 1977, and on its first outing was the number 3 show in America. Happy Days was number 1, and Laverne and Shirley was number 2. Being the number 3 rated show in all of TV then was much more meaningful than it is today. The viewers could only choose from ABC, CBS, or NBC. Some weeks we were getting a 46 share, which means that almost half of the entire population watching TV that night during our time slot was watching our show. And America instantly took to my character, Chrissy Snow. She was a lovable, ditzy blonde with a heart of gold and a circuitous route to logic. The reaction was instant. The day after the first show aired, I was flabbergasted by the recognition. Everywhere I went, the supermarket, in my car at a traffic light, the dry cleaners, people would say, "Hey, you're the girl from that new show about 3 people in an apartment." Chrissy Snow became a living, breathing person to me. I understood her soul, her moral code. In many ways, she was the child I'd never gotten to be. Suddenly, I understood what being a happy child could be like, and it was wonderful. In analyzing the show, I now see that Jack and Janet represented the parents and Chrissy was the child. Chrissy was safe, nurtured, and protected, as if she were in a normal, healthy family, with all the decisions revolving around what's best for the child. In the dysfunctional home of the alcoholic, like the one I came from, or in an abusive environment, everything revolves around the addict or the abuser. The needs and feelings of the rest of the family don't count. The family is as strong as its weakest link. This was my childhood scenario, which accounted for my feelings of inadequacy that had plagued me thus far. I had never felt important as a child. I had always felt less than other people, other children. I took on the shame of my father's disease as though it were my own. I spent my early life trying to figure out how to be a better daughter so Daddy would love me enough to stop drinking. Of course, I was never able to be as good as I needed to be because my father drank alcoholically for 35 years. I tried to be perfect. I tried to excel at everything. Dad once told me that if I got straight A's, he would give me $5. I came home with A's and 1 A- and he wouldn't pay me. It wasn't good enough. Perfectionism takes its toll. Human beings are never perfect. We are always in a state of learning and hopefully correcting our imperfections. So Chrissy was a chance to do my childhood over. I lived out my real child self for 5 years in front of America. And they got her. They understood her thought process. She would never tell a lie and possessed a soul so pure, so innocent, like that of a darling puppy, that everyone wanted to take care of her. So here I was, co-starring in Three's Company, loved, nurtured, safe, successful. Finally, I was accepted. But something felt wrong. Deep down in my gut, where we all really live, I didn't feel deserving. It all came so fast, so suddenly. Too much attention, too much adulation. I thought my years in therapy had unraveled my confusion. Little did I know that the bulk of the work lay ahead of me. From the beginning of my relationship with Alan, I wanted to marry him. In fact, it had become one of those subjects of conversation that could easily ruin the evening. I loved him enough to commit. Why couldn't he? The reasons, of course, were evident. We had a lot to work out between us, namely our children. But I was naive and talked myself into believing that marriage would solve all our problems. All along, he was adamant that he was never getting married again, nor did he want any more children. Why? I would ask, frustrated. Because marriage made me feel trapped, he told me. I'd feel like I'd have to be home rather than want to be home. Well, I announced dramatically, I plan to be married. I hope it's to you, but if not, I will find someone else. Fine, Alan answered, exhausted. We had been through this same discussion so many times. If one of us didn't end it, we'd wind up in a huge argument. As I look back, I'm astounded by my immaturity. I should have been more evolved in my thinking. Because of my empty threats, Alan continued to hold the power in our relationship, and this made me feel crazy. Landing the part on Three's Company gave me confidence. It took away my desperation. It refocused me. I was no longer destitute. I could live without Alan. I didn't want to, but I knew I could. Somehow my lack of desperation allowed Alan to relax. I stopped pushing the issue. I began to be comfortable with living together. Financial independence transformed me. When the time is right, I told Alan. In the meantime, it's better like this. I meant it. The big rush was off. We started getting along better. We were enjoying each other again. The fear of pushing emotional buttons that would provoke an argument had dissipated in this one area, lightening the load of emotional baggage somewhat. But discussions about our children were still very flammable. We walked on eggshells in this area and spoke cautiously. But we were moving forward as a couple. We were trying to find peace together in these new and uncharted waters. We were doing the best we could with the information we had at that time. In July 1977, John, Joyce, and I were asked to guest on the Dinah Shore Show. Dinah's show was the hot talk show of the 70s and was watched daily by most Americans who were home in the afternoons. Dinah was romantically involved with Burt Reynolds at that time, and the media wrote incessantly about them because she was so much older than he. After the show, Alan and I went to our favorite restaurant, Le Restaurant on Melrose Place, to have a romantic dinner. I was on cloud 9. The Dinah show had been great. Three's Company was great. My life felt great. It was one of those perfect nights where problems took a backseat and a pervading sense of joy took over. Alan took my hand and said, "I love you, Suzanne. Will you be my wife?" It came so easily. It felt so right. It was time. I wasn't surprised as much as I felt settled, content. "I love you too," I answered. "I would love to have you as my husband." We decided to have a relatively small wedding that autumn in our newly purchased home, a beautiful glass house that sat on the sand overlooking the blue waters of the Pacific Ocean. It had been a phenomenal period for me. I was marrying the love of my life, and my career had skyrocketed beyond my wildest expectations. So far that year, I had been on the covers of 55 national magazines, including one of the highest-selling covers of Newsweek to that date. The same week I planned to marry Alan, 60 Minutes, the most popular news magazine show on television, came to my home to do a feature on me as the next Farrah, the next blonde. I was so busy with personal and professional obligations, I came home on Friday afternoon, November 18th, and found Morley Safer sitting in my living room waiting to interview me. The morning had been so busy that I was running late. Imagine, late for 60 Minutes. But this was my new reality. I wanted a perfect wedding, and mostly it was. We invited 80 people, mainly family, with a few business friends. John Ritter, Joyce DeWitt, Norman Fell, and Mickey Ross and Bernie West, who were two of the three producers, all attended. The wedding was to be held upstairs in our living room overlooking the ocean. We constructed a lovely chuppah, a gorgeous canopy of flowers under which the rabbi conducted the ceremony. Above the living room, on the balcony, 3 sopranos sang Gregorian chants, counterpoint to our friend Alan Bly singing cantorial music downstairs. It was a stormy beach day, but by the time of our ceremony, the sun had broken through and decided to give one of God's great shows. As I walked down the aisle of our living room toward my husband-to-be, the sky turned a magnificent fiery orange of every imaginable shade, which contrasted with the midnight blue of the ocean. Between the golden sunset, the howling winds, the rich sounds of cantorial music, and Gregorian chant, it was the perfect moment I had waited for all my life. Our children, on the other hand, were not so happy. None of them smiled during the ceremony. In fact, they all looked glum. They had tried so hard to divide and conquer, and they had lost that battle. They felt threatened by our union and didn't know where they fit in with Alan and me now being a united front. We should have talked it out with all of them. The wisdom of this escaped me at that time. I should have let them express their feelings and fears. I should have let them air their anger. It was ignorance, or maybe deep down I didn't really want to know how they felt. Perhaps, as with so many other issues in my life, I felt time would heal on its own. By now, John Ritter, Joyce DeWitt, and I were having the time of our lives. The success of the show was heady. By our second season, technically our first season had only been 6 weeks long, we were the #1 show on American television, leaving all others in the dust. No other program could get close to our unbelievable success. The 3 of us were like children, bouncing around the set, laughing, joking, acting like kindergartners. It was conducive to the chemistry. It was what was appealing to viewers. 3 kids living in their own apartment, 2 girls and a guy, and it was non-sexual. but at the same time, very sexual. John's character was constantly groping at Joyce and me, though never actually making any contact. That would change the dynamics. There was an innocence about all of us, yet also a naughtiness. Oh, those kids, people would say. We were the kids. In some weird place in my mind, I finally had a safe family. I loved going to work. I loved being a hit. I loved being Chrissy. One day, Alan called me at the studio. "Guess what?" he asked. "You've won a People's Choice Award for Favorite Actress in a New Series. The awards ceremony is in 2 weeks, so get yourself a fancy dress." "Really?" I said, flabbergasted. It was all too much. A People's Choice Award is immensely meaningful because it is voted for by the people in a national poll. I was very excited. I had grown up watching famous people receive awards on these types of shows, but I never dreamed I would be one of them. The big night came and I felt like a princess stepping out of my limousine. Flashbulbs popped in my face. "Chrissy, Chrissy, we love you," I heard coming in waves from the throngs of people standing behind the red velvet ropes. I floated down the red-carpeted entrance in a state of disbelief. How my life had changed. Inside was more glitter and glamour. Jane Fonda, Mary Tyler Moore, Angie Dickinson, Warren Beatty. Everywhere I looked, there was another famous face. And then I heard the magical words. "And the winner is Suzanne Somers, favorite actress in a new television series." I kissed Alan, John, and Joyce, and then floated up to the stage. The award was very heavy crystal, and I almost dropped it. The audience laughed. "Thank you very much," I said emotionally to the audience. "This means so much. My dad always said, 'Get yourself in the middle, Suzanne, get noticed.' Well, I can't do much better than this. Thanks, Dad. I love you all." And I walked off the stage. For all the bad and bitter times, it was my dad from whom I wanted approval. In my moment of triumph, it was my dad who came to my mind. Blood connection is more potent than we can know, and the child within is forever looking for that little pat on the head. "I was damn proud of you," my dad said on the phone the next day. His voice was trembling. "That's all I ever wanted to hear from you, Dad," I replied. "I love you." The People's Choice Award propelled me further forward. The only glitch was that John and I were getting the bulk of the publicity. All the pictures were of John or me, or of John grabbing after me. Joyce had initially shunned publicity, saying she was an actress, not a celebrity, so most of the magazines passed her over. Nevertheless, bits of resentment were brewing. Joyce is an incredibly learned and gifted actress. She had been at the top of her class at UCLA. The network plucked her out of school with a contract after having seen her in a play put on by the respected UCLA Drama School. I felt that Joyce resented my success, and I felt badly, because I liked her. I had taken very few acting lessons. What I didn't know about acting I learned by watching my two talented colleagues. I was like a sponge. I learned instantly. If you're lucky, maybe once in a successful career you get a character who lives and breathes and gets into the consciousness of the country. It's a creative thrill. Gene Stapleton had it with Edith Bunker. Carol O'Connor had it with Archie Bunker. Lucille Ball had it with Lucy. And now I had Chrissy. It's more than having good writers, although they are integral and important. It's something that clicks in your brain. You know this person better than anyone. In a way, it's like giving birth. The only negative is that sometimes the character can imprison you. An actor can be so identified and beloved in one role that the public doesn't want to see him or her in any other form. Carol O'Connor has never had the same degree of success with any other character as he had with Archie, nor has Gene Stapleton been able to be anyone we loved as much as Edith. But I wasn't concerned with this. I would have been happy to play Chrissy the rest of my life. I was curious to see how she turned out. What did life experiences do to her? Did she grow and change, or did she remain the same wide-eyed, trusting virgin that she was? Mickey Ross, one of the producers of the show, was my comedy mentor. He was a former Broadway actor who had had moderate success on stage. As the producer head writer on Three's Company, he finally hit the jackpot. Mickey was extremely talented. To this day, he is probably the best comic talent with whom I have ever worked. At the time, he was 60-ish, tanned and great-looking with wavy silver hair and Mel Gibson blue eyes. To stay in shape, every day he found time to drive to the ocean from the studio and swim vigorously in the salt water for at least a half hour. He was an excellent writer, actor, and director. It was the producer part of his role that was not his forte. Producing requires business sense. He was strictly creative. He had a soothing sound to his voice, and when he was calm, an engaging laugh that was regularly interrupted for a puff on his cigarette. He did have a short fuse, though, and I instinctively knew to avoid provoking him. Mickey understood what I was creating with Chrissy, and he also became protective of the character. "She's right," he'd say when I would protest a line. He was my ally. Mickey gave me more kudos than he did the others because in his mind I was his creation, which eventually contributed to an atmosphere of resentment. Sometimes the air would get thick with tension and unsaid feelings. This was my new and subliminally dysfunctional family. We could never put our feelings on the table because in reality we weren't a real family. We were a bunch of people thrown together, having incredible success, and the stakes were high. None of us were going to mess with that. Mickey would work with me between scenes, during lunch, and even after work. I listened, I learned, I watched. He became like a father to me. I wanted to please him. He was very controlling. If I didn't do a line or a scene perfectly, he'd scold me, or he'd look disappointed. I would apologize and then make sure to dig deeper into my soul and feelings to further purify this character. Chrissy walked differently than I did, without any awareness of her body and sexuality. She was a woman child. Men wanted to protect her and have sex with her. Women loved her purity and innocence, and they knew they could trust her. I lived and breathed this character. When in public, I was confused about who the people wanted me to be. I thought they could never love the real me the way they loved Chrissy, and I loved being loved. I wanted to please everyone. Mickey was cool and distant around Alan. Maybe they were too similar. Alan liked Mickey because he understood him. He respected Mickey's talent and appreciated the energy Mickey put into my instant training as a comedic actress. They both had been raised in Eastern European Jewish immigrant households, so they were simpatico, understood each other and what they were about. Still, even though Alan and Mickey seemed to be cut from the same cloth, I always sensed an underlying struggle between them. Alan was the only person who had more control over me than Mickey did. The line between me and Chrissy was becoming blurred for Mickey. There was a strange sexual tension between us, like a father who desires his daughter but knows it's wrong. Alan had what I think Mickey thought he wanted: the woman, the character, and control. With my life suddenly turning topsy-turvy with career demands, I was finding Bonnie, who had been so instrumental in getting me there, now creating an atmosphere of chaos I couldn't deal with. Several times a day she'd call the rehearsal hall and scream through the phone, "They want you on Hollywood Squares!" "You can't do Hollywood Squares," Alan would say later that night. Bonnie should be reading scripts and making an overall network deal for specials, movies, and an ongoing series after Three's Company. If you start showing up on game shows, you're going to lose your specialness. You're the star of the #1 show in America. Use it as a springboard. But Bonnie came from the world of daytime television, and that's where she had her contacts. I needed someone stronger for a manager, someone with finesse, someone who knew their way around the nighttime, big-deal world of prime time, someone like Jay Bernstein. I kept thinking to myself, look what he's done for Farrah Fawcett. I wished I had someone like him advising me. Maybe it was time. It was my first tough decision. Bonnie had to go. "I'm really sorry," I told her when I finally talked to her shortly thereafter. "Please understand. I felt awful and sad. I liked Bonnie, and she was actually gracious about it. Disappointed, but gracious." Jay took over as my manager midway in the second season of Three's Company in 1978. That's when the action really began to go into that phenomenal state. Because Jay received no commission on Three's Company, he was motivated to drum up as much extra work as possible. Now I was busier than ever. He soon put together future deals for me to star in 3 feature films and 2 TV movies of the week from my first hiatus. Every time he had the chance, he talked me up with reporters. "She's the next Farrah," he would tell them. But Jay also knew how to manipulate me by pressing my insecurity buttons. By our second year together, he'd call me at night and say, "You're slipping. Farrah's got 4 covers, Cheryl's got 3 covers, and you only have 2. I'd buy into it and get off the phone biting my nails, thinking I was about to fall from grace. I still didn't have any sense of me and how much I was worth emotionally or in the marketplace. The momentum around my career took its toll on the set. John Ritter and I had now risen up and above the show itself. During our summer break in 1978, John was doing 2 motion pictures, and I was scheduled to star in 2 TV movies. Our outside careers caused tension with Joyce, and also made the producers feel insecure about their ability to control me. Somehow they did not like that Jay and Alan had so much influence over me. My happy TV family was quietly becoming more and more dysfunctional. For me, it was a familiar scenario. The fame machine moved forward without my help. It now had a life of its own. Every move I made was recorded. Photographers waited as I got off the plane. Snap, flash, ready or not, I was theirs. Alan hated this invasion of our privacy. I enjoyed it, but felt badly that Alan didn't. I was afraid that if we pushed the attention away, I would lose all that I had gained. I was afraid not to be the nice girl. Unfortunately, what you fear is what you draw to you. I was afraid of losing my fame. I believed I was my accomplishments. There would be lessons to be learned down the road, but I was living in a state of mild panic. If they knew who I really was, I was afraid they wouldn't be interested. I had a lot to learn and a lot of growing to do. At home, things were schizophrenic, wonderful and terrible. Alan and I were more in love than ever and angrier than ever. It was a passionate love, and I believe our passion kept us together during these rough times. In the spring of 1978, Alan suggested private boarding schools for all 3 children. Removing them from the Los Angeles area where drugs and addicted parents seemed the norm was a sensible idea. Part of me also felt that Alan saw this as an opportunity to avoid having to spend every waking hour with my child. I felt torn emotionally. It did make sense. It would be beneficial for all 3 children, but it also felt to me as though we were farming out our problems. Yet Bruce craved normalcy. He wanted order and routine, and at this time I was not able to give it to him. I would cry into my pillow each night at the thought of sending him away 5 days a week. When Alan would try to comfort me, my body would become frozen. In my mind, I blamed him for the dilemma. I lost sight of the positives associated with this school. It had the potential to be a real opportunity. In the end, though, I decided to give it a try. The Ojai Valley School was a wonderful environment and challenging intellectually. Bruce and I talked about it for a long time. He was not anxious to go away, but we reached a decision together. He would try it for 2 weeks. If he didn't like it, he could come home immediately. If he was scared or lonely, I told him, I would drop anything I was doing and drive the 2 hours to Ojai and get him. He would come home every weekend, and he could use our credit card to call me anytime and as often as he wanted. I told him I would go with him and stay as long as he needed me while he adjusted. Since Stephen and Leslie were living at their mother's house, it was not for us to decide where they went to school. Alan suggested to his ex-wife that boarding school might be beneficial, but at the time she had a wait-and-see attitude. In the fall of 1978, when Bruce and I arrived at the school, we were directed to his room by a pleasant and kind-looking young man who would become one of his teachers. 2 hours later, he was settled in and was being called to his first school assembly. "Why don't you go, Mom? I like it here. I think it's going to be fun," he said. "Are you sure, honey?" I asked. "I planned on staying a few days." "Yeah, but there's nothing for you to do," he said, "and it looks like I'm going to be busy." "It's okay. I'll see you when I come home this weekend." "Okay, darling, if you're sure you're okay," I said hesitantly. "Remember, whenever you need me, I'll be here. I want you to be happy. If you find you aren't, we'll change things." I kissed him goodbye. As I drove through the village of Ojai towards the ocean, I felt hollow inside. I pulled into the parking lot at the public beach and got out to take a deep breath of ocean air. I needed to fill myself with something to remove the emptiness I felt inside. I sat at the water's edge with my head in my hands and sobbed. Tears and salt air mixed together and stung my eyes. Through the heaving of my aching chest, I asked the God of my understanding to help me know if I was doing the right thing and to please take care of Bruce and his pure, beautiful soul during this time. Things eased up a bit between Alan and Bruce. School gave them both space from each other during the week. Bruce came home on weekends, and I would try to keep my schedule clear to be with him, although it wasn't always possible. I knew enrolling him in this school was a positive move, maybe even an essential one. Yet I missed being with Bruce every day. He was my pal. I felt guilty sending him to boarding school, but he was flourishing as the school year moved on. I believe we seriously underestimate the severity of damage done to children of divorce. There is such pain involved when parents split up. Suddenly, the children no longer feel safe. Alan's children felt tremendous loyalty to their mother. They probably thought Daddy had left their mother for me. Why would they want to forgive me? They couldn't blame their father, because then they would have to face their feelings of anger and abandonment. It was easier to direct that anger toward a stranger, the new woman. And my behavior didn't help much. I tried to connect with Alan's children by being so nice and so kind. I'm sure my sugary sweetness made them sick. I thought I was doing everything I could, but in reality, my behavior was false, and his kids knew it. I was afraid to act the way I really felt. I was trying to be some kind of parent to them, but they didn't want another mother. Who could blame them? I hadn't even come close to earning their friendship yet. When Stephen came over on weekends, it was obvious he was not happy. He was usually sullen and brooding. It became obvious to us that Stephen must have felt threatened that Bruce lived with us and he did not. I discussed the situation with Alan, and we decided to invite Stephen to live with us permanently. At that time, he was living between his mother's house and ours, whoever was serving the best dinner. It was annoying. He needed to choose to stay at one house or the other. After thinking about it, he chose to live with us. It was time to be with his father. It was a difficult transition for all of us, but it was the first step towards finding peace in our marriage. Now Alan had his own son living with him. Because of this, I hoped he would no longer hold on to his anger at Bruce. Then there was Leslie. Children will act out until they are understood, and Leslie seemed angry from a place so deep that even she couldn't understand it. I didn't know how to deal with her. There was something powerful about her, and it made me afraid to demand she treat me the way I wanted to be treated. Instead, I took out my anger at Leslie through Alan, in the same way Alan took out his anger over living with Bruce on me. Frankly, I don't know how our marriage survived dealing with Leslie, and I don't know how Leslie survived us. I had never imagined myself to be a wicked stepmother, but that was now my casting. Yet it was not all bad. There have to be some redeeming factors in every situation. Otherwise, you wouldn't put yourself through it. Every once in a while, we'd all let down our guard and for a moment see one another differently. We'd laugh together at Sunday dinners. Bruce and Leslie always really liked each other, and that helped all of us. My cooking brought pleasure to the family, and I would go out of my way to prepare everyone's favorites. I made Sunday dinners as often as possible, and I'd prepare wonderful things. Roast duckling with maple syrup and vanilla, plum tarts for dessert. Cooking was all I could do for them. It was the only gift my stepchildren would accept from me. During this time, I ran into the mother of a friend of Leslie's at a clothing store. "How's Leslie?" she asked. "Fine," I said tightly. "I just love her. She is so sweet, so bright, so funny." It was an insight. Leslie had another side she refused to show me. I could tell by the woman's tone that her affection for Leslie was genuine. How I wished I could know the Leslie she knew. That one sounded easy to love. Maybe one day I will, I thought. I can't give up hope. I must keep trying any way I know how. Bruce continued to excel at Ojai, not only intellectually but emotionally as well. Over the summer, he told me one day, "I have an A average, so I think I could get into the Thatcher High School for this fall if we enroll me right away." Thatcher was the other private boarding high school in Ojai and required a high academic standing for entrance. Stephen had seen how much Bruce was enjoying the environment at Ojai, so he asked if he could go there when school commenced in the fall. Both Alan and I were thrilled by his enthusiasm. Leslie was still not doing well in the Los Angeles school system and had been sneaking out of school with her friends. One day the principal called Alan and told him marijuana had been found in her friend's purse and that all the kids seemed stoned. When questioned, Leslie was defiant and insisted she didn't know anything about drugs. During my next hiatus, 1979, I was scheduled to star in 3 independent feature films. None of them was exactly the perfect vehicle for me, but Jay said to keep throwing projects against the wall until something stuck. He told me, "I want to spread you into so many areas of show business that it will take 5 years before you can possibly fail." This was what it was like working with Jay. He always interjected the negative to keep me insecure, to keep me needing him. Nonetheless, I was excited. At the conclusion of the Three's Company season that year, Alan and I, Bruce and Stephen, packed our bags and took off for London, England. Leslie wasn't talking to us. Earlier, she had deliberately gotten herself thrown out of the Ojai Valley School for smoking marijuana. There was a strict no-drugs policy, so she was immediately expelled with no tuition refund. Leslie was a free spirit. We had forced her to go back to Ojai for a second year, and she was not going to do anything she did not want to do. Now she was back at Beverly Hills High, which was where she wanted to be. We arrived in London and were met at Heathrow by producer Elliot Kastner's 1957 chauffeur-driven maroon-colored Rolls-Royce Silver Wraith. There were only two like it in the whole world, and I was told the other one belonged to the Queen of England. The movie was Yesterday's Hero, and I played a successful rock and roll singer opposite Ian McShane, an English actor who played an alcoholic soccer hero. I hardly needed to act in this one. I knew the dance with the alcoholic all too well. The promises, apologies, pledges to clean up his act. Then the broken promises, because I understood the only real love affair the alcoholic has is with the bottle. Everything else is a distant second. This was the first and only Jackie Collins novel to be made into a feature film. The rest have been television movies. When Alan first read the script of this movie, he said, "It's a piece of shit." He was right. It wasn't a very good script. But between the director and Jay, they convinced me I could make something of it. The director, Neil Leifer, was a famous American sports photographer and recorder of athletes and political legends. His photographs appeared regularly inside and on the cover of Life magazine. One of his most famous pictures was of him lighting Fidel Castro's cigar while Castro lit Neil's. "It's a lousy script," I told Neil long distance to London one night. "I know," Neil said, "but we'll rewrite it as we go along. We'll essentially throw this script away and we'll work from the outline. We can make it great, and I promise I'll take fantastic pictures of you." Jay went on to convince me. "It's an important career move," he said. "Nobody knows you in Europe, but everybody there loves soccer, so this is a way to get them to notice you." Alan still protested until Jay lost it and screamed, "We need a European movie. It opens up another whole arena for her." Jay and Alan were at each other's throats often those days. Whenever Jay had the chance, he'd take me aside and tell me, "We need to talk alone, without him. Alan's always there, and he doesn't understand you like I do. I can make the public know what a good person you are. That's what they will respond to. You need to be loved because of your background. I understand you, Suzanne, because I started in this business wanting everyone to love me." Whenever Jay would get me alone, my thinking would become confused. He'd make me feel that without him I'd be nothing. But Alan felt that we should not be so anxious to jump into just any feature film. He thought we should wait until the perfect vehicle came along for me. "I'll support you in whatever you choose, Suzanne," he said. "I just wish it was a better project." Once in London, we met with Elliot Kastner. He was a nice guy with an agenda, charming as can be. You couldn't help but like him. He was a transplanted New Yorker from Brooklyn and had produced hundreds of movies. A few were moderate hits, including Missouri Breaks with Marlon Brando, but mostly he did movies that were released in Europe. Elliot had a friendly face and impish sparkling eyes, white straight teeth, his own, and a captivating smile. He was of average height and wore beautiful, hip, expensive clothes, like cashmere overcoats and designer suits, with the casualness of a rock star. Instead of a shirt and tie, he'd pair a T-shirt with a $2,000 suit. The making of Yesterday's Hero was a glorious job for me. Every morning James, the chauffeur, would pick me up in Elliot's Rolls-Royce in front of the elegant and famed Dorchester Hotel. I felt like a princess. In the back seat would be crumpets and tea, jams and jellies, and I would nibble away as I was driven to the English countryside. While I was filming, Bruce and Stephen had a great time discovering London, which kept them busy since they had only a brief 2 weeks during their spring break. It was one of the few periods where their sibling rivalry dropped. They needed each other for companionship. London could be a big, scary city if you were alone, but together they took English cabs, rode the double-decker red buses, saw Big Ben, Windsor Castle, Trafalgar Square, and Harrods. It was fun to come home to my hotel at the end of each day and listen to them both excitedly replay their day's adventure. It was a glimpse into the possibilities of familial harmony. We were 3 weeks into shooting, and contrary to my deal, I still didn't have a paycheck. My contract specified that I would be paid at the end of each week of filming. Jay was home in America at this time taking care of Farrah, so Alan took charge. "Don't worry," Elliot told Alan. "The new production office is not geared up yet, and you'll get it next week." Alan had to be the bad guy. "Elliot," he said, "you've got to pay Suzanne, or I'm taking her back to America." "Don't worry, Alan," Elliot answered reassuringly. "I'll have it tomorrow. Hey, why don't you guys come to my house for dinner tonight? I live at Runnymede. It's the site of the signing of the Magna Carta. Tessa and I would love to have you." That was Elliot's way. He charmed the pants off of you. Tessa Kennedy was Elliot's mistress of 15 years. She was in her late 30s, blonde and great-looking. She looked like she could have been a former model. They had 2 children together. When I asked Elliot why he didn't divorce his wife, he said he didn't want to hurt her feelings. That was Elliot, always padding his space, always keeping the balls in the air, never quite letting them fall, so no one could ever really get mad at him. So Elliot, Tessa, and their 2 children lived happily together at Runnymede, while his wife lived in a posh Mayfair flat. "We'll see you in 30 minutes, Alan said to Elliot on the phone that night. Runnymede was like something out of a medieval fairy tale, a glorious 12th century manor with a long driveway that had originally been used for carriages delivering noblemen. Inside was perfection. Tessa had incredibly good taste and was an interior designer, her biggest client being King Hussein of Jordan. The king sent for her regularly in his private Boeing 747 jumbo jet to fly her to the palace to continue redecorating one sumptuous room after another. Tessa was elegant, sophisticated, and aristocratic, a complete contrast to Elliot and his D's and Do's Brooklynese. She graciously showed us around the mansion, each room lovelier than the one before. Priceless antiques, windows spewing brocades and silken tassels, Aubusson rugs everywhere, unbelievable art covering every inch of wall space. 2 perfect little English children appeared. The little girl was 5 years old and dressed in a simple white voile dress with stitching and smocking that only the most expensive stores would sell. The little boy was 7 years old and wearing gray pants, a navy blue blazer and tie. "Good evening," they said as they curtsied. "Well," Tessa said as she stood up and gestured toward the dining room, "shall we have dinner?" "Where's Elliot?" I asked, bewildered. "Oh," said Tessa nonchalantly, "he just got a phone call and he had to go to a funeral." Alan and I looked at each other confused. We had just talked to him 30 minutes earlier. Someone had died and was already having a funeral service within 30 minutes? At night? Well, that was Elliot. "He'll be back later," Tessa said calmly. I felt like I was in the middle of a John Cleese English comedy. It was absurd. The table was set with antique Limoges, heavy lead crystal, and sterling silver. The table itself was a long mahogany Queen Anne that could easily seat 30 or 40 people. The 5 of us huddled at one end. The butlers brought us our dinner, each plate covered with a silver dome. Yum, I thought, I'm hungry. I wonder what we're having. Duck à l'orange, I wondered. Rack of lamb with mint sauce? Filet mignon with béarnaise sauce? None of the above. The butler uncovered my plate, and I was staring at macaroni and cheese. "Huh. Well," I said, trying to hide my surprise, "it sure makes me feel like home. Haha, isn't this a nice change?" It tasted good, but the presentation was a little grand for such a humble meal. As we were having our gourmet dessert of vanilla ice cream, Elliot arrived. "Hey, you 2, he said with his charming grin. "Look at that punum," he added, holding my punum, which is Yiddish for face, in his hands. Then he sat at the other end of the table, 40 chairs down, and started absent-mindedly polishing the mahogany surface with his napkin. Alan and I stared at him blankly while pressing our knees against each other's under the table in astonishment. After he showed us the spot outside where the Magna Carta had been signed, we went home. Elliot never explained his absence, and we never asked. Of course, the money wasn't there the next day, so Alan decided to pull the plug, which meant I would not be going back to work until Elliot fulfilled my financial contract. The phone rang in our suite. "Alan, sweetheart, what you up to?" Elliot asked innocently. "We're going home," Alan said firmly. "A deal's a deal. I can't let Suzanne work for free." "Don't worry about a thing. I'll have the money tomorrow morning," Elliot answered sweetly. "Okay," Alan said. "When we have the money, Suzanne will go back to work." "No problem," Elliot answered. "Meet me in front of the Mayfair branch of the Bank of England tomorrow at 11 sharp, okay?" "All right, I'll see you then," Alan said matter-of-factly and hung up the phone. The following morning, Elliot met Alan in front of the bank. Elliot had payment in full for the entire movie, in cash. He handed Alan a large paper bag filled with money. You cannot open a bank account in England unless you live there, so Alan was stuck carrying the money himself. He had cash stuffed inside his underpants, t-shirt, even his socks. We couldn't mail it home. We couldn't leave it in the hotel room. We couldn't wire it into our bank account. We didn't feel comfortable keeping it in the hotel safe, so we were stuck with the cash. In the middle of shooting yesterday's hero, we had to fly back to Los Angeles for me to shoot an Ace Hardware commercial that was to look like a fabulous Las Vegas show. Stairs, feathers, legs, dancers. It was like a marathon, all that flying back and forth, but at least Alan was finally able to deposit the money in our bank. At the wrap party for yesterday's hero, Elliot was all smiles. "I had a good day," he said. "I sold this movie for more money than I got for Missouri breaks. All because you are the hottest property in America right now," he said, pinching my cheeks. "Good," Alan said, smiling. "Then maybe you'll sell us your Rolls Royce. Suzanne loves it, and I'd like to buy it for her." "I'll do better than that," Elliot said. "I'll give it to her." Wow, I couldn't believe it. 4 days later, we were on our way back to America, and the Rolls Royce was already steaming across the Atlantic Ocean, delivered to Los Angeles, stamped on the side of its crate. 5 months later, we were back in London for the premiere of the movie. The critics liked it. It looked like we might have a hit. At the premiere party after the movie, a woman tapped me on the shoulder. She was well-dressed, but her face looked ravaged. She was holding a drink and appeared to be drunk, but I couldn't be sure. Her voice was trembling. "You've taken away the only thing that means anything to me in the whole world. You took my car." Suddenly, Elliot appeared and his wife disappeared. "Hey, yous guys having a good time?" Elliot asked with his usual charm. That's when I found out the car belonged to his estranged wife. "I'll send it back," I said in shock. "Nah, I've been wanting to get her a Jaguar. This kind of just speeded things up," he said, smiling. Vintage Elliot. When Jay had persuaded Farrah Fawcett to leave Charlie's Angels after only 1 season, ABC had pronounced him persona non grata. He would never work with them again. I was feeling the effects. Three's Company was the #1 show on television, yet I was not asked to participate in the Emmys, which ABC hosted that year, or specials, or movies of the week. Anything that came up on ABC seemed to be closed to me. No one at ABC would return Jay's phone calls. He called me one day and said, "I've got an idea. I've decided to sell your hiatus. ABC is not sending you any extra work, so I called Bud Grant, president of CBS Entertainment, and asked if he would like to have a contract with you for the next 3 years. You would continue to star on ABC for the run of the show, but on hiatus you work for CBS on projects that interest you. You can do specials and movies of the week." The situation made me nervous. "I don't want to upset Fred Silverman," I told him. "He doesn't care about you," Jay said. "He just wants to get back at me for pulling Farrah, and he's using you to do it." CBS offered me a deal to have my own show called Suzanne at the end of my series. Before I signed with CBS, and without telling Jay or Alan, I called Fred Silverman's office to tell him about the situation, but he was out of town. So I was put on the phone with the senior vice president. I explained my situation, that I felt loyalty to ABC. They had been so good to me, and I needed to know what they wanted to do about this contract offer from CBS. Handling this myself was very naive. I should have left it to my lawyers, manager, and advisor, but I was still green to big-time show business. Jay, however, practically had my foot in the CBS door. I waited and waited, but ABC never responded, so finally we signed with CBS. Not a good move. It was big news. Fred Silverman furious over Suzanne Somers' desertion to CBS was the story in the trades. I felt awful, so I called Fred. "I talked to your vice president 10 weeks ago and he never called back," I explained. "Yeah, well, you could have tried a little harder to get me," he said angrily. "How could you do this? I gave you your big break. Don't you think you owe us any loyalty?" he asked. "But I tried," I stammered, feeling upset. "Yeah, well, good luck," Fred answered, and he hung up. I was devastated. I had not wanted to create ill will. 2 weeks later it was announced that Fred was leaving ABC and defecting to NBC, which had offered him a better deal. So much for loyalty. I felt angry with myself, but Jay also had another agenda. By signing with CBS, he would be getting his 15% of my future. If I stayed at ABC, he knew he'd be long gone before it was necessary for me to make any long-term deals. I'd walked right into this one. Now ABC had no need to nurture and coddle my career. Just get as much out of her while we've got her, was the attitude. "I had a great idea last night," Alan said excitedly over breakfast one morning. "What?" I asked. "You and 6,000 sailors." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I see you singing and dancing on an aircraft carrier with 6,000 sailors as your audience," he said enthusiastically. "That's a great idea," I said. I could immediately visualize the whole program. Even though America was not officially at war with any other country at the moment, we needed to rebuild the dream again which the Vietnam War had shattered. We had not been victorious at war for the first time in our country's history. The idea of rebuilding the image of our armed forces, while at the same time entertaining America with my own television special, was thrilling. Uniformed men not only look great, but they are also an enthusiastic audience. "We'll hire the most beautiful dancers in Hollywood, and we'll work up a great act for you and your girls. Then we'll fly everyone to the nearest aircraft carrier to do the show, and the sailors will go nuts." I had been wanting to sing and dance all my life, and it was customary in the 70s to give hot stars their own television specials. It was a chance for the audience to get to know their favorite performers better and in different formats. The following week, Alan and I walked into Bernie Safronski's office at CBS, which was now my new contractual home, to sell the idea. Bernie was the vice president of specials at CBS, and he was smart and likable. "Suzanne and 6,000 sailors on the USS Ranger," Alan said. "Let's do it," Bernie replied immediately. "We'll shoot it next spring." Alan always says, when the deal is done, talk about the weather. We agreed on the idea, and Bernie told Alan to get together with business affairs to prepare a budget. Done. "Nice weather we're having," Alan said, and I knew it was time to go. Now that Farrah Fawcett was separated from Lee Majors, she required more and more of Jay's time to handle her events. I relied upon Alan to take over when Jay wasn't available. My deals for the next 3 years were in place, and the bulk of my time was spent fulfilling those obligations. "Jay is not really managing you anymore," Alan said one afternoon. "All the calls are coming through my office. I've learned a lot from him, but I now have a clearer vision than he does of where you can go with your career." "Maybe you're right," I said, concerned, "but let's wait until after Christmas." And what a Christmas it was. Alan's parents came from Toronto, and I wanted to share our success with the whole family. I wanted to make this the Christmas that no one would ever forget. Never mind that Alan's parents were Jewish and didn't celebrate Christmas. Just to be with their son and grandchildren was enough for them. My mother-in-law, Margaret, loved me and had accepted me as her blonde Shiksa daughter-in-law and all that came with me. Alan was utterly devoted to her. I can't remember a day, regardless of where we were in the world, that he did not call her. 10 years had passed, and Alan and I were now joined at the hip. It was clear to all that we were soulmates, even though we were still working out the soul part. She called us the lovebirds. I had tried so hard to make this a great Christmas. I even cooked dinner for 30 people by myself. I meant well, but inadvertently it was overkill. Overindulgence to the point of boredom and embarrassment. It took 3 hours to open all the presents. The kids had so many gifts that they got tired of opening them. When I looked at Margaret, I could see she disapproved. I realized that I had done the wrong thing. Margaret had survived the Depression. She did not believe in overindulging. She said nothing to me, but I knew what she was thinking. "What about saving? Why are you spoiling the children? This is too much." On the other hand, I still did not feel worthy of my enormous salary. It was almost as though I was trying to get rid of it so I could feel normal again. I didn't see my talents as anything special. I saw Chrissy Snow as special, but I couldn't connect her with me. Before dinner, but after the Christmas morning gift bonanza, I had flown my entire family from San Francisco and had them picked up by a parade of limousines and brought to the house. As they entered, a mariachi band of 7 men greeted them. We danced, drank, sang, and nibbled on homemade, by me of course, appetizers in front of the 18-foot Christmas tree which, naturally, I had decorated. Everyone laughed and had a great time except Leslie, who was now in one of her black moods because Alan had caught her with her girlfriend in his closet smoking pot during the Christmas festivities. It was as though she couldn't handle having a good time in our presence. After Alan's reprimand about drugs and sneaking behind our backs, she came to the Christmas dinner table with a scowl on her face. She toyed with her food and would not join in any conversation. To me, the black cloud of Leslie's mood darkened the dinner table. I lost control. The words just popped out of my mouth. "If you don't want to be here, Leslie, just go home," I said tightly, trying not to yell but not doing a very good job. I had had it. I was overtired from trying to make a perfect day, a perfect meal, a perfect house, a perfect Christmas. "I hate Suzanne," Leslie yelled at anyone listening and threw down her napkin. "I'm going home." Everyone at the table became quiet and uncomfortable. I wanted to cry, but I put on a happy face so as not to show my true feelings. I couldn't see what was really going on with Leslie, which I can only chalk up to my lack of development and understanding. I saw the situation only from my own point of view. I guess anyone who feels that she has to be Superwoman would have trouble gaining insight into a little girl ravaged with pain over the losses in her short life. In retrospect, a day like we were experiencing could only bring sadness. She might have felt badly that her own mother was not included, or she might have felt badly that she no longer had her mother and father under the same roof. When she was a child, her grandparents had stayed with her. Now they were with us, in particular with me, and nothing was the same anymore. At that time, people thought of divorce as something that happened to the parents, not the children. Yet the children of divorce are the biggest losers. The adults find new lives, and the children are expected to fit in. They all react. Some burst with anger, and some stuff it down like Stephen and Bruce. But the anger smolders and will eventually erupt like a volcano. After the New Year, we taped one of my favorite episodes of Three's Company. It was the show where John Ritter and I accidentally got handcuffed together, and Chrissy had to go out on his date with him in a way that his new girlfriend wouldn't realize we were cuffed together. I think it is the funniest episode of all our seasons together. John and I laughed from our bellies all week. The whole idea of it was so absurd. It was pure farce, my favorite form of comedy. The ponytail on the side of Chrissy's head had started as an accident because 1 year into the show I had had a little problem. Every Friday morning I would go to Vidal Sassoon in Beverly Hills and have Virginia bleach the roots of my hair white. Virginia was colorist to the stars, her biggest client being Rod Stewart. While the bleach was cooking on my scalp, Virginia was gabbing away on the telephone. Suddenly she ran toward me with panic on her face. "Oops," I heard her say as she toweled off the bleach. She had left it on too long, and the hair on the top left side of my head broke off at the roots, leaving a huge bald spot. This is the stuff of lawsuits today, but I wasn't interested in anything but a solution. We solved the problem by bringing the hair from the other side of my head over the top of my head and catching it in a ponytail. Luckily for me, I'd inherited my mother's thick hair, thus the one-sided ponytail was born. On the night we taped the handcuff show, my studio hairdresser was having trouble getting the ponytail to look just right. We were running late. Mickey Ross, one of the producers, came storming into my dressing room screaming, "What's going on? Cast intros were supposed to be 5 minutes ago!" His anger level was totally inappropriate for the situation. He yelled so loudly I started to cry. "I'm sorry, Mickey, but we're having trouble with my hairstyle tonight," I stammered. "This is not a show about hair!" he screamed and stormed off. 5 minutes later, I was ready and standing backstage waiting to be introduced. I walked on stage as my name was announced to thunderous applause and screaming. "We love you, Chrissy!" the audience yelled. I looked out at them, and as my eyes adjusted to the light, there, to my delight, was the entire center section of the audience, filled with teenage girls, each one of them wearing the Chrissy ponytail. Well, Mickey, I thought, maybe this is a show about hair. As I look back, I now realize that the idea of a producer ever screaming at anyone is preposterous. That I allowed Mickey to do so was clearly evidence of my continuing lack of self-worth. I let him treat me like a child, so he kept doing it. It was control. The producers of Three's Company were intent on keeping us the kids. If we were good kids, we'd get a little pat on the head. If we displeased Daddy, we were in trouble. John Ritter was hot, doing features every hiatus. I was hot and doing the same. Joyce was doing TV movies, but not features, and that created tension. There was an underlying competition amongst the cast. We were each looking over our shoulders to see if the others were gaining. Because we weren't a real family, the generosity that exists in a real blood family was not present. The goal was to rise above our show, to become so ingrained in the public's awareness that the show became secondary. This was happening to John and me, and to some degree Joyce. All the magazine covers, interviews, television specials, and movies were building our story. All of us wanted to be sure that when Three's Company ended, we wouldn't end. Around this time, Barbara Walters called Jay to ask if I would let her interview me for one of her famous specials. Jay was enthusiastic. Alan was not. "She'll eat you alive," he said. He was worried that parts of my past would come up and I would not be able to handle it. "Give me more credit," I told Alan forcefully. "I can handle myself. I'll just tell her the truth." Alan was reluctantly convinced, but felt protective. The Barbara Walters interview was my most important public appearance up until that time, and remains important to this day. Now, almost 20 years later, people still come up to me and recall that interview. Barbara is good. She interviews for hours and then edits down to the vital 20 minutes. She gets you relaxed and trusting. It's an important foreplay. Then, just as you start to sway back and forth, moving gently with the rhythm, bam! She hits you with a big fist. In my case, it went like this. "Barbara, I hate doing this, Suzanne, but, well, I really have to." At that point, she pulled out a topless picture of me, an ad that I had posed for years earlier, which I hoped would never surface again. I looked at the picture with horror, totally forgetting that the camera was on me in close-up. In that instant, the memories flooded back, the humiliation, the desperation. "Why did you do it?" I heard Barbara ask. I took my time to answer. Then slowly, quietly, sadly, I explained. "Have you ever been so poor, so destitute, that you had to sacrifice all dignity to get through your life? I was in my 20s and divorced. I was alone in the world with no means of support, and a child recuperating from being run over by a car. I had to do what I had to do to put food on the table. Taking my clothes off was a humiliating experience, but I had run out of options. The rent was due. I remember arriving at the job and deciding that I must be professional about the whole thing. I went into the dressing room, took off my top, and walked into the studio like it was the most natural thing in the world. Inside I was dying, but I was expert at pretending, so I smiled the biggest smile I could muster, hoping that by doing so we could take the picture of the happy nude girl and get it over with. I guess I've always hoped it would never surface, that it would be some kind of Secret Service job, but that's pretty naive thinking. I told her I was ashamed. I told her I was afraid the public would turn on me for posing for such a low-class picture. Barbara was quiet for a moment. I was overcome emotionally. I couldn't look up. I stared at my lap, wishing I could walk away and never come back. "Well, that explains a lot," Barbara said. "I thought you had done it recently." "No," I said. "No, it was years ago." "Did you write the poem about your son around that time?" Barbara asked softly. "Yes," I said. "Would you read it to us?" Good, I thought. This will change the mood. But instead, as I started to read the poem, it intensified my emotions. Tears were streaming down my face. "Sometimes I see my son and remember when I thought I'd failed because..." There was a long pause, and then I had to stop because the words would not come. I was overwhelmed with feelings. I felt I would choke from the ball of tears I was holding in my throat. 3 times I tried to read the poem, and each time my emotions overcame me. Finally, Barbara said, "I can't make you do this. It doesn't feel right to me." "No," I said. "No, I want to read it. It's important to me." Finally, I got through it. Sometimes I see my son and remember when I'd thought I'd failed, because so many told me a mother who bore a boy should not send away his father. Sometimes I see my son and remember the pain of unloved pregnancy and the resentment I sometimes felt at raising him alone when I could not have the freedom I deserved. There were days I was as much a child as he, when I wanted someone to give me the love I gave so grudgingly to him. Days that we learned together about life and had as many questions. Sometimes I see my son and wish his mother had it all together, to give him strength and courage I only sometimes have, to listen when my own hurts need hearing, to hold him even though I am alone. But sometimes I see my son with trust in his eyes that no one else could give, with a smiling, shining face that says, "There was no failure, no monstrous mistakes, only good things and memories of love and caring." Sometimes I see my son and he touches me in secret corners, and I know that everything is fine and always will be. Sometimes I see my son, and I love him. The day after the show aired, Barbara was inundated with requests for copies of the poem. Once again, truth showed me its unbelievable power. People were different toward me after the airing of that show. Suddenly I had texture. I wasn't just that ditzy blonde. I was a survivor with a heart and a soul. "I guess it's time," Alan said. It was 1980, 4 seasons into Three's Company. "Let's ask Jay to dinner tomorrow night and we can discuss the whole thing in a civilized way." Naively, neither Alan nor I figured the dismissal of Jay would come as a major blow. He had to have been expecting this. We invited Jay to our house for a drink before dinner, deciding to use that time to tell him of our change in plans. Alan started the conversation while I sat on the couch of our office. "Well, there's no easy way to do this," Alan explained, "so I'm just going to tell you. We've decided that Suzanne and I can handle her career." Jay's face turned ashen. "You've been great," I interjected nervously. I wouldn't be where I am today without you, Jay. It just feels that it's right to let Alan take over now." As I babbled on, I could see Jay's eyes becoming smaller and smaller slits in his face. The color in his cheeks flushed a strange combination of red and purple. The veins in his neck popped out. I had forgotten that the canes Jay always carried concealed a razor-sharp sword within. Jay stood up slowly, like a warrior, preparing to attack. His voice was trembling and deep. "You can't do this to me," he roared, and with that he pulled the sword out of his cane and slashed it back and forth between Alan and me. His eyes were crazed like a mad dog's. I tried to reason with him while dodging. "Think of the good times," I said, ducking from his sword. My voice was high-pitched, nervous. "Think of all the fun we've had together." "I knew you'd do this to me. In the end, everyone leaves me," he yelled. Swoosh! Whish! I jumped onto the sofa, bending, weaving, avoiding his brandished sword. I never really thought he'd kill us, but Jay could be crazy and you never knew. It took 2 hours to calm Jay down and get him to put his cane away. Jay adored drama, but he was also truly upset. So was I. It had been a great ride with him, and I would miss his outrageousness, but not the head messing. I hoped this change would allow me to calm down and not feel so crazy. What did it matter who was on more covers each month? There was room for all the 70s girls. Farrah, Cheryl, Jacqueline, me. Jay had created the race. I wanted out. I also wanted out of the tug-of-war between Alan and Jay. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to find some peace and some balance. Now Alan was in complete control of my career. I was pushing the envelope by turning myself over to him. Either the power struggle would find its balance in equality, or we would self-destruct, and a delicate balance it was. Alan understood my career better than I, so I needed his guidance, but at the same time he was my husband, and I would not, could not, allow myself to be swallowed up by him. I had control issues. I had allowed my father to bully and badger me physically and emotionally all my life. As a successful woman, I stopped letting him push me around. I yelled back. I stopped accepting unacceptable behavior. And then I married Alan. I had lived with two people who were not going to give up control, and in that I was going to teach myself to learn what I needed to learn. I find myself amazed at the inherent knowledge we all possess. Deep inside, we have an inner voice, and the messages are always there. We're always hearing them, but rarely listening. Somewhere along the road of life, in order to find the softness in yourself, it is essential to let down your guard and begin to trust. Alan was such a controlling person that I had never, in all our years together, seen him cry. It would have been too revealing for him. I was so concerned with telling Alan over and over that he didn't own me that I was afraid to tell him that I needed him, that I respected his vision and wanted his advice, that we could do this thing together and be more powerful as a unit than either of us would ever be individually. I was afraid he would see me as weak. But this is why we found each other, to find our softness and to learn for the first time in our lives that we could trust, that we could need another person without giving up our personal power. In this lesson, we were learning together that we would get the greatest of all gifts, a deep, enduring, respectful love, a love we both had longed for all our lives but had never allowed ourselves to have. It required surrender. It required a give and take and an understanding of each other's strengths and weaknesses. And it was important to take care that we never belittled or sabotaged the parts of each other that were most vulnerable. Most marriages never find this balance of mutual trust. Most couples are too busy defending their personal control. In the end, to retain control, everyone loses, and nothing is won. I really want to sing, I told Alan one day. You're going to, Alan answered, laughing. As soon as the season ends, we're shooting the TV special. You'll be able to sing your heart out in front of 6,000 sailors. I know, but I'd like to put together an act before that. Alan went to work. I loved that about him. I called him the Wishmaster. When the time came to put together a Vegas deal for me, Alan made good use of all the relationships he had forged while hosting his own show in Canada. He called everyone he could think of and asked them how the Las Vegas business worked. One after another, they each pointed out that no one had ever successfully crossed over from television to nightclubs. These were two different mediums, he was told. The latter had no safety net. My hiatus periods from Three's Company would give me time to pursue this new career. Before Jay had left, he and Alan were offered a 2-week deal for me at the Riviera for big money. They said no. Then they were offered 2 weeks and more money at the Sahara, but it too was declined. After Jay was gone, Alan went to Bernie Rothkopf at the MGM Grand, and before Bernie had a chance to say anything, Alan said, I want a 2-year deal for her, and I don't care what the money is. Why? Bernie asked. Because if she falls on her face the first time, I want her to be able to come back again and again until she figures it out, and she will. Soon, I had a 2-year deal at the MGM Grand Hotel, 8 weeks a year, plus a big $1 million music special for CBS, and Alan had never heard me sing a single note. He was the manager, I was the performer. If I said I could sing, he believed me. I knew I could do it. I wanted to live out my childhood fantasies. I wanted to be an entertainer and have audiences love me. Now I had the opportunity. We easily slid into working together. It wasn't cliché. It wasn't the manager hovering and criticizing. He provided the business expertise. He was the deal maker. He was the salesman. I was the product. His job was to sell his product for the best price and to place the product in the right arena. I kept charge of quality control. I made sure I kept myself rehearsed, rested, fit, and that I ate properly for maximum energy. We hired Carl Jablonski as my first choreographer, Saul Ilson as writer-producer, Earl Brown to write special musical material, and Rhett Turner to make the costumes. Every day after I finished Three's Company, my group would come into the same rehearsal hall and we'd work until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning for weeks. It made me feel vulnerable to begin rehearsals of any kind. Everyone stood around watching while I tried to learn a new form. The writers were looking for keys to my personality, the choreographer was searching for natural movement skills, and the musical director was listening for vocal strength. Night after night we'd work. My feet ached and burned with blisters. Back pain was constant. I lost weight and slept jerkily from nervousness. The enormity of what I was taking on loomed over my head. What if I failed? What if I made a complete fool of myself? 2 weeks to go. I couldn't sleep or eat. The thought of opening night was overwhelming. There was no safety net. If I failed in front of everyone. By now, Three's Company was so far ahead of anything else on television that 1 week it aired twice and tied with itself, #1 and #1. We were still on an incredible roll. The ABC television show 2020 was now following me everywhere to produce a documentary piece called The Making of a Las Vegas Star. At any given time, I had a crew of at least 12 people around me. They were in my kitchen filming breakfast before work, and then they'd film the Three's Company rehearsal, and into the night with the Vegas rehearsal. We were trying out the act the week before we opened at the MGM Grand at the turn of the century in Denver, Colorado. The club was a dump that entertainers such as Bill Cosby and Paul Anka used to break in new material. It was freezing in Denver and very high, a mile high. I ran out of breath just crossing the street. I woke up Saturday morning, the day of the big opening, with a major sore throat and every flu symptom imaginable. "How am I going to sing tonight?" I wailed to Alan. I wanted to curl up in a little ball and stay in bed all day. "Just imagine yourself well," Alan said. "You've worked too hard to sabotage the whole thing now." I knew he was right. All day, over and over, we practiced the dances and the material. I couldn't remember anything, not even the words to the songs, let alone the dance steps. Dancing has never been easy for me. I'm mildly dyslexic, and right and left create big problems for me. We got past that one by painting my right shoe red. "Red, red, black, black, red, black, red," Carl would call out. I couldn't count, I couldn't remember my colors, my throat hurt, I had a fever, and I wanted to throw up. Then the time came, and in an hour it was all over. I had gotten through it. It was good. Wasn't it? I didn't know. Couldn't know. Backstage was filled with newspaper reporters, well-wishers, bigwigs, and photographers. "How was I asked Alan while I lay in his arms later that night. "Good," he said, and you'll get better." Alan never lies, but I knew that good meant mediocre or worse. I felt vulnerable. The next day, the reviews came out in the local Denver newspapers. I only remember this one. "And then she sang I Don't Know Why, and I still don't know why." It was a disaster. The papers creamed my performance. "She should stick to TV," said one reporter. "How do you feel?" Dave Marish, the producer and host of my 2020 segment, asked. "I'm not giving up," I said. 6 days to go to my big opening at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. The pressure is enormous. We threw out half of the new material from the Denver show. Rehearsals became intense. No more joking around. My whole family and most of my hometown were coming to the MGM opening. This made me more nervous than knowing that half of America was going to see the same thing on 2020. The MGM was overwhelmingly big. I couldn't see the back of the room from the stage. The room was laid out in tiers. "Your mom is here," Alan said to me backstage on opening night. "I can't see her till later, Alan. I can't see anyone right now. I'm just too stressed out. Please explain." Why did I do this? I keep asking myself. Why did I put myself through this? 2020 is there in the dressing room. I don't even see them now. I'm sitting on my stool in front of the mirror with my head in my hands. I'm afraid to go out. Please, please, God, be with me tonight. "Time to go," Alan says. I feel like I'm walking to the electric chair. There's nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. The overture begins. "I can't do it," I say to Alan. "Yes, you can," he says firmly. "Now you go out there." Then he put his foot on my butt and actually pushed me onto the stage. I'm there. Everyone is clapping. They are excited. This is their Chrissy come to life. This is the hometown girl making good. I start to sing a la Chrissy with all her wide-eyed innocence. The audience loves it. Alan insisted that at the end of the show I sing God Bless America. "Why?" I asked. "It'll sound stupid." "No, it won't," he says. "That way you'll get a standing ovation." Sure enough, I tell the audience at the end of my show how grateful I am that I was born in America. Only in this country can you become somebody, no matter where you are from or who you are, and I believe it too. And then I sing. The audience leaps to their feet. Alan has the pyrotechnic guys blow off mortars, aerial displays, and enough fireworks to light up Manhattan. The audience is clapping, screaming, yelling, "We love you!" It's a success. As a husband and manager, Alan was warm, devoted, supportive, caring, and nurturing to me. Yet his treatment of Bruce was still very cool. Bruce would look to Alan like a shunned little orphaned puppy. Just a little pat on the back would salve his confused soul. He was really needing an important male presence at this time. His own father was 500 miles away during these years, so the only adult he could count on day to day was me. But how does a mother fill the needs for her son in a way that only a father can? I was doing my best, but I knew that sometimes my best just wasn't good enough. That I let this go on for so long is something I live with to this day. What was missing in me that I allowed Bruce to be exposed to Alan's indifference? I'm still shocked by my behavior. My denial permitted Alan to continue to inflict emotional damage on Bruce, whom I loved more than anyone in the world. I know I would throw myself in front of a moving train if it would save Bruce's life, yet under my own roof, I allowed his soul to be wounded over and over, which is surely as difficult to endure as any physical pain. This was my greatest prevailing dysfunction. I was still afraid of my imagined wrath of Alan, a wrath I had never seen. This feeling was rooted in a place deep inside from years of watching the original family of my childhood. The first relationship I had ever observed was that between my mother and father. My mother was afraid of my father, and because of this we always tiptoed around him, adapting to his behavior, never saying anything provocative, never doing anything to change the present mood if we could help it, because the consequences were dire. He would explode into violent rages, drunk or sober, if one of his many buttons was pushed. Without knowing it, I had unwittingly carried this learned behavior into my present marriage, and now Bruce was having the same experience with Alan. We are affected by our past until we take the steps to change. I didn't know I could insist upon it. I didn't know when Alan was cool and unloving to Bruce that I had the right to say, "When you treat Bruce with indifference, I feel hurt and protective. I feel I must take Bruce's side because he is powerless, which makes you the enemy." This could have started a dialogue of reasoning. I know Alan didn't want to hurt me. If we had been communicating properly, we could have worked on breaking down the emotional barriers he had constructed. At this point, he was acting from a place of habit, but I was still afraid to bully back and take my full power with him in our personal relationship. It was easy to take my power in our business partnership. We were scrimmaging on a level playing field. But in our home, I felt emotionally handicapped. I should have demanded he treat me and my son the way we deserved to be treated. The other underlying fear I had was rejection. What if I demanded fair treatment and Alan rejected the notion? Then I would have to decide to leave and mean it. Empty ultimatums render one powerless. Resolve behind an ultimatum is the only way, and I wasn't emotionally ready to leave. So his behavior continued. With it came confusion. How could I love someone so much, so passionately, and still feel so much anger at the same time? You can't force someone to love you or anyone else. I hoped that time would help. At night, in the dark, I would ask the God of my understanding for help. How can I reach Stephen? What can I do to bring Bruce and Alan together? Help me to love Leslie. Parts of my life were under control and the other parts were beyond my reach. When I was happy and enjoying myself, I could always feel a little tug, like a puppy nipping at my skirt and making me walk slowly for fear I might trip. I could never relax completely. I knew something needed to be done, but I didn't know what that was. This was the stuff of my prayers. Stephen still wouldn't let me in. He still wouldn't allow me to get inside where he lived with his closed-off feelings, but every once in a while I would get a clue. One sunny day, Stephen and I were in the kitchen together. I was making a mango tart for that night's dessert, so I was busy and not looking at him, but I was enjoying his presence. Out of the blue, he said, "One day I hope I make a lot of money and then I'm going to buy Mummy a really nice house and send her traveling wherever she wants to go." That was all he said, but it was an insight. Obviously, he was pained by his perception of his mother's existence. Perhaps he perceived her to be lonely and living a lifestyle that did not seem fulfilling to him. In reality, she lived in a really nice house with a swimming pool and a safe neighborhood. She had her longtime housekeeper, Margot, living with her, as well as Leslie. In addition, she had created a successful career for herself as an artist. But maybe Stephen felt guilty about his decision to live at our house with his father, instead of with his mother at this time, and for choosing to live among the luxuries of our new good fortune. Perhaps it was guilt that made him so glum. Perhaps it was simply adolescence and the accompanying confusion. He liked living our way, but maybe showing his enjoyment didn't feel right. Whatever it was, I just heard the sweetness within his statement. Just a kid who wanted the best for his mother. I felt his fierce loyalty and I admired it. I had no desire to be his mother or take anything away from his mother. I was only looking to be another asset in his life, someone with whom he was comfortable. It was selfish in origin. I knew that if I connected with Alan's children, he would love me even more, and in turn, by example, would want to love Bruce. I wanted Stephen to be able to let down his guard and relax in our home, his home. If he could relax, I believed, Alan would be able to relax also. Then little by little, the tension would ease. I wouldn't have to be nervous in my own house, nor would Bruce. Home should be safe and free. For now, ours was not, but we were taking small steps. Sometimes the tension in the house coupled with the pressure of my work would make me feel crazy inside. Then once again I would have one of my inappropriate explosions. It wouldn't work its way out unless I threw something that made a loud crash and bang, or sometimes I would try to hit Alan. He would grab my wrists hard before I connected and look angrily into my eyes. "Don't hit me." He meant it. I would struggle and writhe while he held my wrists until I would crumble in a heap of tears and confusion on the floor. Then I would feel ashamed and apologetic. I wouldn't know why I had gotten so out of control. I was so sorry, I would sob uncontrollably. We'd been through the same scenario so many times before. When would I be able to figure out the source of this pain, confusion, and anger? I had never considered the importance of seeing a lifetime pattern laid out over my past and present life, like a blueprint of my behaviors. I never saw the triggers. Every time my life whirled around me out of reach and out of control, I stuffed my feelings down, 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 and then like Mount St. Helens I would erupt. Each time it took a piece away from us, a little piece of our hearts and souls. How many pieces do we have before we run out? How many times could we tolerate the craziness and the violence before we would simply self-destruct? What I really failed to see during this period was that we were all unable to be truthful. That was the problem. 5 people, angry, hurt, threatened, jealous, resentful, and afraid. Mostly afraid. Each of us was acting as though the other was the one with the problem. We all pretended we didn't see it. I don't mean we were lying. As a result of my initial therapy, I had explored the lying phenomena. I had lied as a child and as a young girl about my reality. I had lied to make myself appear better than I thought I was. At that time of my life, lying was abhorrent to me. It still is. Even an exaggeration is a red flag. I now realize I hadn't explored truth and honesty deeply enough. Pretending is dishonest. Not sharing feelings is dishonest. My dear late friend, psychiatrist and author David Viscott said, "If you lived your life honestly, your life would heal itself." How true. As a family, we were unable to be truthful about our feelings. As a family, we desperately needed truth in our communication. We needed to reveal how we really felt about each other. Our success or failure as a family depended on how much truth we could tell and hear. Only when we were able to express our true feelings with each other, no matter how unpleasant, could our relationships begin to right themselves. But we weren't ready yet. As work continued to surge at us like a swollen river, Alan and I would immerse ourselves in its current. It was a wonderful, creative distraction. The joy and pleasure that came from doing what we loved overshadowed personal problems and gave us needed relief. Soon negative feelings were pushed away and the pain was replaced by this new anesthesia called work. We were now on the nightclub circuit. Hiatus weeks were spent playing clubs all over America. My stage show was declared a hit. Every place we went, it was received with glowing reviews. We sold out at almost every venue. It was a very exciting time. I had a lot to learn, but what I lacked in polish, I made up with charm. If I made a mistake, I would fall into goofy Chrissy behavior and all would be forgiven. Chrissy was everybody's child. I was also getting much-needed experience under my belt before we taped the CBS special, Suzanne Somers and 6,000 Sailors, at the end of the Three's Company 4th season. I wanted to shoot the show live, start to finish, complete with ad-libs and mistakes. I miss the old days of television when great entertainers like Frank and Sammy seemed to simply walk on stage and give a show. It never seemed rehearsed or staged, simply polished. I wanted to bring that type of entertainment back and remove the safety net of videotape. Live, by the seat of my pants. A 1-hour show should take 1 hour to tape. We rehearsed the special for weeks. Again, I was working with the same team. Carl Jablonski choreographed in a way that protected my untrained feet. I had rhythm, I knew how to move, but between the dyslexia and not quite understanding about counting, I needed dancers who were so good and so tight that I could simply move in my special and personal way in the middle while the dancers did all the fancy stuff around me. These rehearsals were more fun than those for the original act. The can she do it pressure was off. I was now on the road constantly, and with each performance was gaining a little more confidence. I liked entertaining and felt comfortable in front of a large crowd. It felt natural, like I belonged there. Maybe childhood dreams are more potent than we realize. All those nights hiding in the closet, shaking with fear from the violence downstairs, were spent dreaming of being on a stage. It was my distraction, my salvation. My dreams lifted me out of the desperation of our miserable existence. In my dreams, I was a fairy princess, the fairest of them all, loved, adored, wanted. It was always a beautiful stage, as I had imagined Broadway stages to be, and I was always in the middle, covered with crystal and shimmering light. "I want my opening costume to look like crystal," I said to Rhett Turner. Dreams can come true. He designed me a magnificent gown of chiffon that made me look nude, with crystal beads creating an intricate but smooth pattern all up and down my body. When I walked, it caught the light and outlined my curves. Doing a TV special is exhilarating. The network gave me an enormous sum of money to produce 1 hour of programming. I took no personal fee. I wanted every penny to show up on screen. We booked the guest stars, my pal Marie Osmond, whom I knew from appearing on the Donnie and Marie show so many times, Gladys Knight and the Pips, and Flip Wilson. The day to shoot the special finally came. We were ready. We had all arrived at San Diego, where the ship was docked. I was nervous, but not in a fearful way. It was nervous excitement. I knew we had a great show. The USS Ranger, under the command of Captain Dan Pedersen, was ready too. The aircraft carrier was shined, scrubbed, and picture-perfect on the shimmering Pacific Ocean. We had the complete cooperation of the U.S. Navy. A stage was built in the middle of the ship's airstrip, flanked by 8 fighter bombers, 4 on each side. We designed the stage in the shape of a cross so I could work the entire area side to side. No one had a bad seat. Months of fine-tuning performances in theaters in the round had been good training. I was standing on the stage, marking the space and getting a feel for its size, when I looked up and saw Gladys Knight and the Pips on the sidelines ready to rehearse. I walked over and introduced myself. They were the most professional people with whom I have ever worked. They were there on time, complete with their own costumes. Rehearsal took 10 minutes to get their sound correct, and then they quietly, patiently waited in their dressing rooms for the show to begin. Marie Osmond and I rehearsed a brilliant piece of special material written by Earl Brown called You're Not Like That at All. It had to do with our perceived images, she being Donnie's little sister and a good little Mormon with no experience in romance, and me being the bad girl that everyone thought was dumb. It was tongue-in-cheek, naughty and nice. But where was Flip Wilson? It was 1 hour until showtime, and no one had seen or heard from him. Flip had been known to use a lot of cocaine, as did so many entertainers of that time. I didn't like the way people behaved on coke. The effect made them act like extremely hyper children. They literally bounced off the wall. "We're going to have to do the show without Flip," the director said to me. "It's 10 minutes to showtime. Even if he shows, there's no time to rehearse. The only thing we can do is post-tape him after we lose the audience and slug it in editing." Damn, I thought. I wanted this to be live, no stops. Damn Flip Wilson. I had been warned he was unreliable. Still, he was one of the funniest, quickest guys on television, and I needed his wit to balance all the music. "Okay, let's go," Alan said. "Time to start." My heart was pounding excitedly. The fighter bombers were covered with sailors sitting and standing. The airstrip around the stage was a sea of white hats. It was just beautiful, just as I had hoped. The music started and 14 fabulous-looking girls danced on stage in white sailor suits with hot pants. They started singing Why Do Fools Fall in Love? Frankie Lyman and the teenagers originated this song. Then I came out in the middle, just like my dream. The screams of the sailors drowned out the music. Everywhere I looked, I saw an ocean of dancing white hats. Before the number was over, I ran off stage and quick-changed into the nude and crystal killer gown. For the moment, I was the fairy princess in the middle of the beautiful fairy tale, just like in my childhood fantasy. After the guys quieted down, I told them to close their eyes and imagine their arms around their favorite girl, as I sang Neil Sedaka's Breaking Up Is Hard to Do. They were left swooning as the Pips entered stage left, doing that incredible Pips thing, while Gladys entered center stage singing Midnight Train to Georgia. The sailors screamed with excitement. Marie and I finished our number, and while I changed, she sang alone. In the meantime, Alan was on the phone with Flip's agent, who was no help. At the end of the show, I sang my tried-and-true closing number, God Bless America, in a long, skin-tight, red bugle-beaded gown with a high neck and long sleeves. Sure enough, the captain had a tear in his eye, and the sailors held their hats over their hearts. The show finished with a standing ovation and thousands of white hats thrown into the air. I whispered, I love you, and I meant it. Then I blew them a kiss and walked off stage. I could hear the screams behind me. Alan was waiting and took my arm to steady me down the stairs. I was a combination of so many feelings. The dream had come true. I had lived out my childhood fantasy. I finally felt I was doing what I was meant to do. Flip's here, Alan said flatly as he hung up the phone in my dressing room. He was 36 hours late. I thought it was tomorrow, Flip said through a drugged fog when we met him. It was obvious he would not be able to perform that day. We called his agent to fly down immediately and keep Flip sober until he finished taping his piece the following day. I would have liked to have had John and Joyce on my special, but seeing as how they hadn't come to my opening at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, or sent the customary flowers or telegrams, I realized they either didn't know about opening night rituals, or they weren't terribly supportive of my outside career. Flowers are sent for support. When you're backstage, they remind you that others in your life wish you well, even if they're not able to be there for the performance. They also create a festive and uplifting mood in the dressing room. In fact, no one from the entire Three's Company cast, crew, or production team had come to my opening. No one had wished me well, and no one had asked how it went. My feelings were terribly hurt. Rather than us connecting as a group, my popularity with the public had disconnected me with everyone on the show. I felt misunderstood. I was too young and too new in the business to have downplayed my excitement and enthusiasm for all that was happening in my career. When I was around everyone, as I look back, it must have appeared that all I cared about was me. But the reality was disbelief that someone like me, who had spent a lifetime thinking I was worthless, had been dropped into a life that was so unbelievable. The producers probably saw my success as further erosion of their control. I also believe Joyce had a problem with me. I liked her, and at times we had incredible laughs together. She was sweet, kind, and wonderfully talented. But as each day passed, it seemed the more fame I garnered, the wider the gap grew between us. Each magazine cover with my picture put up another barrier. On most television shows, the dream of the producers is a breakout character. The Three's Company people had achieved this breakout dream, but the producers resented it. The more attention I got as the character or myself, the more popular it made the show, which in turn produced revenues. The producers were the ones sharing the profits. I wasn't entitled to an extra dime. I was making them rich, and I was happy to do it, at least in the beginning. But they were so worried about losing their control over me that they allowed an atmosphere of veiled contempt to permeate the show. Everyone's real character was starting to emerge. I could feel it, like a chill. I would walk into the rehearsal hall to an icy reception and wonder what I had done. It didn't feel good. I liked all of them and wished they liked me. But the way I dealt with my fame had created an imbalance, and there was nothing I knew of that could change the situation. The party was essentially and unofficially over. As my success began to grow outside of the show itself, Mickey Ross became intent on destroying it. He wanted to keep control no matter what the cost. I credit so much of what I learned to Mickey. Together we had created something way beyond what we had initially perceived. But rather than enjoying the creation, he became angry that I had learned to fly from the nest alone. I was the bad girl again, just as when I was a child and had thought that if I could figure out how to be a better daughter, my dad would love me enough to stop drinking. Here I was, an adult in her 30s, and the same old demon still rode on my back. The 5th season of Three's Company was in full swing. It was late August 1980. My contract is up in a couple of months, I told John and Joyce while backstage one night. I'm going to ask for profit participation, and I hope you guys will support me, because whatever I get, you also get. You don't have to do anything, because you both already re-signed your contracts last year. But if the two of you stand by me, we will all have more power. They both sat and stared at me. Finally, John said, "Go for it, babe." "Sounds great," added Joyce, without conviction. It was naive of me to count on them, or even to ask them. They had not been supportive of me or my projects up till this point. Why would they start now? But I figured money would be a good incentive. I was the one renegotiating. I would be the patsy. I felt that after 5 years of holding the top TV spot, John, Joyce, and I were entitled to an increase. The original investors involved with the show were already receiving huge financial compensation. Alan and I saw that other actors like Alan Alda and Carol O'Connor were being paid a percentage of the profits, plus $250,000 a week on their shows. At that time, and still today, that is an incredible amount of money. But they were worth it. Why? Because their names brought in profits. But no woman had ever been paid that much except Lucille Ball, who owned her own studio, Desilu. It was risky to go for the big pot of gold, but these were new times. Women were worth as much as men. I wanted to try for the big money in my business. If John and Joyce supported me, we would win. I felt my positioning was solid. My entertainment lawyer, Gunther Schiff, who had handled most of my contracts thus far, said this would be a slam dunk. He had just finished negotiating for Penny Marshall and Cindy Williams, the stars of Laverne and Shirley, and had gotten them each a whopping weekly increase and a piece of the back end. I felt assured, but nonetheless nervous. Mickey would be furious at my audacity. Greed and ego were to be my opponents. I knew this going in, but I didn't think that in the end my opponents would be stupid. Surely giving up a small bit of their huge profits would be better for everyone than cutting short the life of the series by a few years. Egos aside, in the end, everyone would realize that keeping the public happy would ensure extra years of life for the show, which equaled more profits for everyone. But a series of strange events started to happen. Only in retrospect, years later, did I understand. Friends of ours received a phone call from an executive very high up in corporate affairs at ABC in New York who was a friend of theirs. He said, "Tell Suzanne I just came from a strategy meeting, and they are going to hang a nun in the marketplace, and it's going to be Suzanne." The phrase hang a nun refers to a practice in olden times. When leaders wanted control, they'd stop at nothing, even hanging a nun. I later heard from a retired network executive who had been there that, unbeknownst to me, the network had decided to make an example of the next big star who asked for a salary increase in order to discourage other series players from asking for the same. Word must have gotten out that I was about to ask for an increase. They wanted to put an end to skyrocketing salaries. Word around the network was that my lawyer got them the last time, but he wasn't going to get them again. If this was true, and we had all known it, I'm sure Gunther would have suggested we use another attorney. But because we didn't have that information, we entered the negotiations. That same week, I was booked for an appearance on The Tonight Show. I had become a regular, one of Johnny's favorites, and lately Fred de Cordova, his producer, asked me to perform whenever I appeared. I decided to do a number from my act called the TV Medley. Even though I had done this medley hundreds of times, I was feeling a lot of stress as a result of all the strategy meetings with my lawyer. I was beginning to wish that I hadn't started the ball rolling. I felt scared. What if I lost everything? The closer I got to the big meeting, the more frightened I felt. In the middle of my dance number on live television, before the millions of viewers who faithfully watched The Tonight Show, my thoughts veered to that fear, and I lost focus. A simple dance turn, and I felt a shooting pain through my ribs. Adrenaline kept me going through the number and my interview with Johnny. After the show, I needed help getting out of my costume. I called in sick the following day to Three's Company. It was the first day I had ever missed. The doctor x-rayed my ribs, and sure enough, my ribs had been fractured by muscles so tight they had snapped the fragile bones. I told the producers and gave them my doctor's name. They didn't bother to call him. I missed a second day. Gunther called me. The producers think it's a renegotiation ploy, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Get them scared. I'll set up the meeting for tomorrow. Tell them to call Dr. Yulee, I said, whining with pain. I didn't like the idea that my injury was being used to set the tone, but I was still allowing others to make my decisions, and I did need another day to recuperate. The meeting was set for Wednesday. I woke up feeling nauseated. Don't be a hard ass, I told Alan over breakfast. I don't want to lose the show, so make sure you don't push them too far. Well, Alan said, it's pretty hard to negotiate without taking a position. I can't say to them, Suzanne would like a small piece of the profits, but if you won't give it to her, it's okay. I mean, I have to tell them that this is what we need. You deserve it, Suzanne. You've worked your ass off. You brought more publicity to this show than anyone else. I stood at the kitchen counter looking worried. Don't worry, Alan assured me. These guys don't want to lose you. They're just negotiating. We'll ask for what we want, they'll counter, we'll come back, and so on until we reach an agreement. But you have to know, there's always a chance. I even believe it's a possibility that Mickey's ego could screw the whole deal. If he won't move at all, do you want me to back down completely? Will you be happy to continue working in that atmosphere? This is your career. You have to tell me how you really feel. I turned away, frightened, and walked slowly and painfully into the living room. I lowered myself uncomfortably into the white linen club chair and stared at the ocean for a long, long time. I had never considered that this could be the end of the most glorious job of my life. Okay, Alan, I finally said. Go ahead. I want a small percentage of the profits, and if they won't agree to that, then a substantial pay increase. Alan looked at me with searching eyes. Go, I said. The decision had been made. Alan left to meet with Gunther at George Sunderland's office at ABC. Gunther was one of the most respected and powerful entertainment lawyers in the business. He greeted Alan in the lobby of ABC Television in Century City. Well, Gunther said, I talked with both John and Joyce's lawyers today, and both said their clients were happy with their contracts just the way they are. In other words, Suzanne is on her own. This was not good news. Somehow Mickey must have gotten to them. Now I was alone in everything. Car phones had not yet come onto the scene in 1980, so I waited in my living room an agonizing 3.5 hours before I heard Alan open the garage door. I had been all alone during this time. The boys were away at school. Alan was fighting with the lock. My heart began pounding like a tom-tom. It was too painful for me to get out of my chair and walk downstairs to greet him. I waited impatiently in the living room. When he walked in, he was not smiling. Not good, he said flatly. What do you mean? I asked, panicked. This was not a negotiation, he began. They had already decided what they were going to do. It was take it or leave it, a small little pittance of a raise at the end of the season, and only if you behave. I was stunned. I couldn't believe my ears. I meant so little to them? I'm really sorry, Alan said sincerely. I feel responsible, and I know that had I said okay to their offer, you'd still be on TV. But I couldn't let them do that to you. Either they were going to humiliate you into returning to be one of the kids again, or they were going to get rid of you. I know you're feeling vulnerable right now, Alan said as he put his arms around me, but you're going to be okay. I was decimated, too stunned to cry. I was distraught that I had let the most incredible job of my life slip through my fingers. There had hardly been a fight. It was a knockout in the first round. Clang went the bell, and then it was all over. The winner was declared. Mickey stood victorious, but his satisfaction was short-lived. He had convinced the network that blondes were easy to come by. He had trained me, he told them. He could train another one, like a seal. What Mickey never realized was that the power was the three of us. Not two or one, but three. American TV viewers did not like having their favorite threesome dismantled. They were used to the original cast. Without the original chemistry, the show lost something crucial. It was like a death in the family. The public mourned the loss of Chrissy. Even to this day, nearly 20 years later, people say to me, "That show was never the same without you." Three's Company continued for another 3 years, but it had lost its command with the public. It would have been easy to sit back and give up. It would have been easy to become the poor little victim. But then who would be the loser? This is my life. Nobody cares if I get what I want out of it but me. I'm the only one who knows what will make me happy. Therefore, I am the only one who cares if I move forward and find my way to peace and satisfaction. That first year was devastating. I felt embarrassed to be seen in public. Without Chrissy to define me, I didn't know where I fit in. I hadn't saved my money because I thought it was a faucet that would never stop pouring forth. When money was flowing like water into our household, I never noticed. But now signing checks made my hand quiver. I watched our savings diminish. To Alan's credit, he never said, "I told you so." I was learning this lesson the hard way. I didn't need him making me feel worse. And looking back throughout the whole experience, I realize I had become my accomplishments. I had conned myself into believing that people loved me because of what I could do for them. Like a marionette, when the strings were pulled, I danced. Like the circus dog, bow wow, throw me a treat, tell me you love me. It took losing everything to understand how needy I was. I was trying to please everyone, my husband, my son, my stepchildren, my family, and my fans. I felt like I was trying to take care of the whole country. No wonder I was spinning out of control. The scenario of my childhood repeated itself all over again, this time, though, with new players. I wanted to find a deeper purpose. Chrissy wasn't enough. I wanted my life to have real meaning, and thus far nothing had filled the empty hole inside. Not all the success in the world could do it for me. So I had created my demise. I had pushed the envelope. I had to lose everything to get to a place in my soul that meant something to me. As with all situations, when one door closes, another one will open, if you want it to. As the days passed from one to the next, a change slowly took place. I began to re-experience the pleasure inherent in my life and relationships. Alan and I had time to rekindle the passion and happiness that had been eclipsed by all the frenzy that surrounded my demise on the show. We took long walks along the Pacific Ocean, held hands, shopped for groceries, cooked glorious meals, and took long naps. It was a time of nurturing and repair. Suddenly, I was able to look around and look forward. One night after I had left Three's Company, Alan and I had just finished our dinner and were enjoying ourselves and the evening. The telephone rang, and the voice on the other end brought panic and a racing to my heart. "Alan," I said, frightened, "it's Leslie's mother. Leslie's had a car accident." Alan's face turned ashen as he grabbed the phone. "Alan, I've got Leslie here," her mother said. Leslie's mother was very shaken up. Leslie just crashed into a parked car in front of the house. No one was hurt, but I looked out the window to see what the noise was, and I saw Leslie get out of the car and walk away from it. I ran out to get her. She seems very drugged out. "I'll be right there," Alan said. He hung up the phone. His face was dazed. "This has been coming for a long time," I said softly. "None of us wanted to see this, but we have to do something or she's going to die." Up to this moment, every time I would mention that I thought Leslie was using, Alan and I would have a huge argument. He didn't want to hear about it. He would insult me and lash out. Now, for the first time in his life, he wasn't in control and he needed my help. I held his head against my chest as he sobbed silently into my breast. It was the first time I had ever seen Alan really cry. I called Leslie's mother back as Alan sat, his head in his hands. Both were distraught. "I can call Carol Burnett for advice," I suggested. Carol had recently gone through a painful and public drug experience with her daughter Carrie. Even though I hardly knew Carol, I had seen her a few times at CBS. Celebrities have a camaraderie. It's not so unusual to call someone you've never met and get a warm response. "There's a doctor at a hospital in Orange County," Carol told me. "He's brilliant. He'll help you through this." But we needed Leslie's cooperation to check her into the inpatient center. The only power we had was an ultimatum. Leslie's mother, Alan, and I became a united front. Suddenly all the petty bickering that ping-pongs between former and present families dissipated. It was tough love. Leslie had the choice of checking into the rehab hospital with all of our support or being financially cut off by the family. She entered the rehab filled with anger, shame, and sadness, a painful tug-of-war on her spirit. After Leslie's second week of inpatient therapy, the doctor asked that all the important players in her life spend a week in intense family therapy at the recovery center. That included Leslie's mother, Alan, myself, Stephen, and Bruce. "We're all here today because we care about Leslie," the doctor said to our assembled group. We were seated in a plain but pleasant room, much like a therapist's office. "I'm sure you are all expecting Leslie to apologize for the problems she has brought to the family," the doctor continued. "Perhaps she might see it that way, perhaps not. Frankly, I've brought all of you here today to allow Leslie to tell you how angry she is with all of you." We sat stunned as Leslie sat looking at her feet. This was a new concept. Hadn't we all been doing everything we could to be loving and understanding? One by one, each of us was asked to tell about our family experience as it related to Leslie, the anger, the pain, the confusion, and the sadness. During this time, I was able to see a side of Leslie to which I had been blinded. She was so hurt. She became a vulnerable little girl before my eyes. I felt my own anger and hurt melt away. Each day brought new healing. We were forced to really listen to each other for the first time. Nothing is more beautiful than love. Our week in therapy turned out to be the catalyst for the healing of our family. Finally, we were starting to listen to one another. As our personal lives improved with each passing day, my professional life was grinding to a halt. The nightclub business was drying up for me. Each inquiry was greeted with the same response. "Without a TV series, she really doesn't have much ability to sell tickets," promoters would tell Alan. At least I still had my pilot commitment from CBS, which was in place from the deal Jay had made years earlier. Alan and I went into business with Norman Lear's company to produce my Suzanne pilot for CBS. I was looking for a series that was surefire, and the only thing I knew the public would accept was a continuation of the character to which they had grown accustomed. But we encountered obstacle after obstacle. There must have been a mole in Norman Lear's company because every draft of my pilot script was met with a cease-and-desist lawsuit threat from the Three's Company group. I wasn't allowed to talk like Chrissy, walk like Chrissy, wear my hair like Chrissy, dress like Chrissy, or remind the viewers in any way of my former character. We were looking forward, not sliding backward. By the time the final shooting script of my CBS pilot was finished, it had been so watered down for fear of lawsuits that it had lost its punch. I was simply a stupid flight attendant who lived in an apartment with a female roommate. They always had trouble paying the rent. Sound familiar? But there was no moral code, no backstory, nothing to care about. The night before we shot the pilot, I knew it was a lousy show. It never aired, and I was given 13 weeks' salary to walk away. The further removed I became from my former life, the less I wanted to do with it. It was no longer positive for me. It dragged me down. I had new dreams. We decided to do my second special due CBS that same year. This time we were going to Germany to tape Suzanne Somers and 50,000 GIs. Most of my same troupe was rehired, with the exception of the choreographer. We hired Walter Painter of Academy Award fame. 2 weeks after we delivered the final edited show, CBS put it on the air. They had a slot to fill, and my special would do the job. It gave me no time to set up any promotion, and without promotion, the public wouldn't even know it was on. When the show aired 2 weeks later, it came and went, which was too bad because it was a good show. Because it was not a ratings sensation, my next scheduled special was canceled. My star was fizzling. It was a big letdown. For the next 2 years, I sat around. Doors were closed everywhere. The money stopped also. Luckily, with Alan's good management, he had protected our remaining finances. I took whatever jobs came my way. I was booked into the Holiday House outside of Pittsburgh. It was a real dump with a boozy clientele. My dressing room was boiling hot and was situated next to the kitchen, so the smell of garbage permeated the entire backstage area. It was a long way from the luxury to which I had grown accustomed, but it was work. Alan and I started spending more and more time in the desert. There's something about the heat and the silence that is spiritual and healing. My feelings of love and commitment to Alan deepened, yet we still had issues looming around us that needed resolution. Leslie was on track and at Parsons School of Design at the top of her class. By now, the change in her was amazing, and this change had a dramatic effect on Alan's temperament. A softness infiltrated his personality. Leslie's anger was also gone, and so was her resistance to me. Despite the fact that I was not working and was still perceived as a fallen sitcom star, I didn't see myself that way. I had this gnawing feeling I had only passed through phase 1 of my career. In my mind, I saw myself as someone entirely new. In 1984, Alan got a call from the Las Vegas Hilton asking if I would star in their big stage extravaganza, the Moulin Rouge. It was a 6-month offer, overwhelming to imagine, but it was the first offer of substance I had had in a long time. Unfortunately, there was a problem with the Moulin Rouge. It was a big, fat, expensive flop. It was a great show that had no focus. It needed a star, a recognizable name on the marquee to pull people in. Henry Lewin, the president of the hotel, spent millions launching the show, and he couldn't even give away tickets. Alan and I flew to Las Vegas to meet with Henry. We arrived at the Las Vegas Hilton on a hot, dusty midsummer afternoon. Henry was a showy kind of man. His office was large and impressive. A waiter asked what we would like to drink, and then we sat down to talk business. Henry had been born in Germany, and although he had become American in every way, after 25 years in this country, his accent had not left him. "Susan," he called me. "I think you and I could be big assets to one another. You haven't worked the last couple of years, and I think the public are ready to receive you again. I've got a great show that no one is coming to because I have no bait." We talked for over an hour, and then I said, "Well, let Alan and me go home and discuss your proposal, and we'll let you know in a day or so." Later that night, as Alan and I lay in our bed, he said, "I think you should do it. If it succeeds, you'll be perceived as saving the showroom. And if you fail, it's a Secret Service job, and no one will ever know you were even there." We decided to do it. Their original show was dismantled and rewritten to accommodate my personality. I enjoyed being back on stage, and the rest of the cast hoped I would bring in the audiences. Their jobs were at stake. Opening night brought the usual jitters, but Alan kept assuring me that no matter what, I couldn't lose. I hoped he was right. "It's sold out!" screamed Henry as he ran into my dressing room. I was finishing getting ready for my opening. "Not only that, they're already lined up clear to the back of the casino for the midnight show!" Coming onto that football field-sized stage opening night, waving to the sold-out house, was a thrill I'll never forget. The audience would not stop applauding. It was as though they were saying, "Welcome back, we missed you." In that moment, I realized many things. I was doing the job I was supposed to do, and never again would I allow myself to work only in one arena. When the television doors closed on me, I felt lost and abandoned. I realized that only I could create my future. Never again would I put myself at the mercy and whims of other people. I would branch out and diversify. I would be multidimensional. I would never feel sorry for myself again. From now on, I would always look at every negative as my opportunity for growth. In that applause, on that thrilling opening night, I grew up. Most weekends we would fly Bruce, Stephen, and Leslie to Las Vegas. As much as I enjoyed the show, it did not compare with the profound experience we were having as a blended family. Honesty and a lack of falseness put us on track. The barriers among us were slowly but surely evaporating. In my nightly prayers, I still asked that the final curtains between Alan and Bruce be lifted. Yet as I fell into sleep each night, I was sure I heard a reassuring whisper in my ear. "Have patience and faith," it seemed to say. "It will all come as you want when it is time." The first year at the Hilton led to the second year, and the audiences kept coming. I was one of the few women filling a showroom, and I loved being the toast of the town. We built a beautiful adobe ranch on the outskirts of Las Vegas and settled in for a long stay. In 1986, several events happened that altered the course of my life forever. For starters, I was named Female Entertainer of the Year. It was an incredible moment for me. I had triumphed over adversity and had come out of it stronger and independent. I felt proud of myself. The second event of the year was more profound. I told Henry I needed to take a month off. It had been almost 3 years of working nightly and flying our children to their new home base in Las Vegas on weekends to keep us operating as a family. That November, Alan and I took a 2-week vacation in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Within an hour after our arrival, I felt connected to that part of the earth in a way I had never before experienced. One morning, we decided to explore the cliff dwellings of Bandolier. They are the original condos, built 2,000 years ago by the Anasazi Indians as shelter and protection from weather, predators, and enemies. Alan and I were all alone, not a soul to be seen. He went on ahead of me to explore, but I lingered on the ledge of a cave that attracted me deeply. Time seemed suspended. Cross-legged, I looked out at the beauty before me for what seemed like hours. That night, I woke from a sound sleep at 3 o'clock in the morning, picked up a pen and paper, and began to write. I had never done this before, yet hours and pages passed with words gurgling out of me like a running brook. All the memories of my childhood floated back like a book already written. The screaming, the yelling, the hiding in the closet, my mother's anguished cries coming from the other room, the violence, the craziness, the fear. Upon returning to Las Vegas, I started writing about my childhood, 10 hours a day for the next year and a half. Each day brought me another step closer to understanding. I was reliving my past in all its darkness, and with it came the light of understanding. I was not a slave to an unfortunate childhood. My childhood was my opportunity to grow spiritually, intellectually, and emotionally. It had been a gift in disguise all along. Forgiveness was truly in my heart. Day after day I completed my task. Suddenly my past and present had meaning. The past was the lesson, and the present brought the opportunity to share the story so others might benefit. Without my success, I would not have had a loud enough voice or the kind of visibility to be heard. The book was to become Keeping Secrets. I didn't know what it would do for me, but I felt new doors would open as a result. 3 years at the Hilton had been an exhilarating and simultaneously exhausting experience. I weighed 92 pounds at the end of the run. I was always cold because of the lack of fat on my body, and my skin and eyes looked drawn without makeup. One night, driving home from work, I said to Alan, "You've got to find a way for me to make a living that doesn't require my presence. I love doing this show now, but as I look down the road 20 years, I don't think my body will be able to take this kind of punishment." I realized that, Alan said. "In fact, I've been thinking about the same thing lately. I'm worried about you. First, I think we need to take some time off, maybe a month or two, to take care of your health. In the meantime, I have an idea about creating a business for you in the fitness field. Let me go to work on it." I smiled to myself. We were a good team. We were doing this together, and I loved that. Not long after, I got a call from Joan Rivers to guest host her late-night show while she was on another assignment. Alan and I were asked to produce ourselves, which was perfect. Alan is an excellent producer and had a vision as to the type of show we could wrap around my talents. Robin Leach, a good friend, was my first guest, so we had a great time together. It felt like a party in my own home. I was the host, and my job was to make people feel comfortable and have a good time. Perfect format for a pleaser. After the show, Barry Diller, the man who had created the Fox network, came to my dressing room and told me I was excellent. Bruce and Leslie were also in my dressing room, along with Bruce's new girlfriend, Caroline. I could tell she was important to him. There's a look a son gets in his eye, and you know this is the one. The fact that he had brought her to the taping was also an indicator. He wanted to show off his new girlfriend, and, also, he was proud of my accomplishments. Alan had picked up Bruce and Caroline at the airport earlier that day, but I had not seen Bruce before the show. "Are you okay?" I asked Bruce. "You seem kind of quiet." He said, "Fine," but as he answered, his eyes wandered over to Alan. I surmised something must have been said in the car. In all the years Alan and I had been together, the last missing piece was his inability to completely embrace Bruce. It was a source of continuing pain for both Bruce and me. Later that evening, after the late show, Bruce, Caroline, Alan, and I were in the kitchen of our beach house. I wanted to make a great dinner for us and make Caroline feel welcome. "Alan, could you go to the wine cellar and bring up a nice bottle of red?" I asked. When Alan left the room, I questioned Bruce. "Come on, honey, I'm your mother. I know you well. What happened?" "I can deal with Alan treating me badly," Bruce said, "but I can't take it if he's rude to Caroline. He spoke to her like she was a fool." I knew how infuriating Alan's tone could be. It was a controlling device of his. By the time Alan came back to the kitchen, the mood was tense. I didn't know Caroline well enough to risk having an argument in front of her, so I was rendered mute. The situation recalled all the previous feelings of years gone by. I had done so much work to emerge as my own person, yet I still didn't have a handle on this one. Alan opened the wine, and as he poured glasses for Bruce and Caroline, who also seemed quiet and uncomfortable, he mentioned that Stephen had just sold a building we owned and had earned a commission. Bruce said sarcastically, "Just for referring a buyer, that's all he had to do?" He was obviously jealous. Stephen had sold it to his best friend's father and had known up front that the friend's father wanted the building, but he left out that information when he asked Alan, "If I can find a buyer, could I get the commission?" Bruce's lack of appreciation for Stephen's cleverness irked Alan. "If I had done that, you would have been all over me," Bruce shot back. "I think you're jealous you didn't think of it," Alan said angrily. "Maybe I am," Bruce said defensively, "but I know you'd never let me get away with that. Of course, though, I'm not your real son." "Oh, come on, grow up." "Fuck you, asshole," Bruce yelled. It had escalated so quickly. Then Bruce reared back, and as if in slow motion, I watched his closed fist come from behind with the full intent to punch Alan in the face. In an instant, Alan grabbed Bruce's trembling fist and held it tight. "I hate your fucking guts," Bruce yelled. I stood watching as Alan's hand tightly gripped Bruce's fist. The two people I loved most in the world, and I was impotent. I couldn't help either of them. "All my life you've treated me like shit," Bruce screamed. "All my life I felt like dirt in my own house. I hate you." "I know," Alan said, "I know." Bruce now had tears streaming down his face. His fist was still trembling. My own face was wet. I felt agony for all of us. Then Alan released Bruce's fist. "Hit me," he said sincerely. "Hit me if you need to." Bruce started to cry even more, and Alan took him in his arms and held him tightly. Bruce and Alan spent most of the night in the living room releasing a shared lifetime of anger, frustration, and hate. Bruce told Alan all the ways he hated him and how much he hated him. Every wrong done to Bruce by Alan was now thrown back in Alan's face. From the back room of the house, I could hear their heated voices. My heart was pounding with anxiety, but this was between the two of them. "The problem with us," Alan said hotly to Bruce, "is that we have nothing in common. I hear you on the phone for hours at a time talking to your mother about your English paper. Well, I don't give a shit about your fucking English paper, nor do I give a fuck about baseball or your fucking bike or your fucking hobbies." "Fine," Bruce shot back angrily. "So let's not bullshit each other anymore, okay? Let's not even say hello if we don't want to. Let's not try at all. We don't care about each other, so let's just stop faking it." I had prayed they would find resolution that night. Instead, they created a pact. They were not anything to each other any longer. They had only one thing in common, and that was me. Because of that, they agreed to tolerate each other's existence. It was not the tidy resolution I had wanted. Real life is not necessarily about living happily ever after. I felt let down. The tension was gone, and in its place, there was nothing. Nothing. I didn't understand what they inherently knew. There had been so much anger, agitation, frustration, resentment, and hate between them, that the only way to begin again was with a bare slate. But now, Bruce felt freed, liberated from his pain. He didn't have any relationship with Alan, and he felt better. Suddenly, Bruce didn't have Alan thrust upon him. We began our relationship by living together, and within a short period I was supposed to think of him as my stepfather, Bruce explained to me. We never had a chance. Their relationship remained in this suspended state for the next few months. In the spring, Bruce had to file a tax return for the first time in his life. He needed advice, so he called Alan. It was the first time Alan ever talked to me as a friend, Bruce recalled. He gave me constructive advice. As silly as it sounds, the first time Alan and I ever bonded was over taxes. After that, Bruce began asking Alan for business advice. Bruce was setting up his first production company and needed guidance. Alan was there for him every step of the way. Bruce had graduated from Berkeley and was in his second year at the legendary UCLA Film School. "I have an extra camera you might want," Alan told Bruce one afternoon. "It might help you in your directing pursuit." It was the respect with which he said it, Bruce told me. It showed respect for the direction my career was taking. It was very mythical to me, Bruce said. In that way, gifts are very important. After that, Alan hired Bruce to do several creative projects for our company. Alan admired Bruce's creativity and professionalism. As I watched the two of them interact, I remembered all the prayers I had said throughout our lives together, hoping that Alan and Bruce would find a way to get along. One weekend, Bruce and Caroline came to visit us in Palm Springs at our home. It was a wonderful 3 days, calm and relaxed. We laughed a lot. No one was trying to be anything except comfortable. That Sunday night, Bruce was in the stone cottage on our property packing his things. Caroline was in the kitchen with me. Unbeknownst to me, Alan had gone to Bruce's cottage to speak with him. Bruce looked up from his packing and saw Alan standing at the door. "Come in," Bruce said warmly. Alan was silent for a moment, and then he said, "This is long overdue, Bruce, but I owe you an apology. I'm very sorry for how I treated you." Bruce was taken aback. He stood looking at Alan for a moment. Then, with tears in his eyes, he put his arms around Alan and hugged him. "Thank you," Bruce said softly. "Apology accepted." From that point on, they started loving each other. It came easily. They said so each time they hung up on the phone with each other. "My whole life was validated when Alan came to me in the stone house," Bruce told me. "I didn't know I needed that apology, but I did. It helped me to know that I hadn't been crazy all my life. I'd always wondered what I had done. Alan volunteering to apologize was incredibly healing. Finally, we were speaking eye to eye. I felt total respect from him, which meant everything. Growing up, I never had Alan's respect. Because of that, I had always lacked confidence. I didn't know where I stood. When I was able to accept his apology, forgiveness came easily. The man who had represented the greatest source of pain in my life has ironically given me the greatest gift. I grew up as a result. Today I don't walk on eggshells, not with him, not with anyone. I went from knowing Alan as someone in whom I would never confide anything to someone who is now an incredibly important role model and confidant. Today he's one of my greatest friends. I love him. He's a father to me. Our ability to overcome our differences gives me faith in humanity. We went from hate to love by following an honest path. Because of that night in the kitchen when I told him I hated him, I now know that I can face anything perilous in life. I know that if something is worth it, I can find a way to work it out. By going from hate to love with Alan, I now believe that nothing is impossible. It was the final resolution to our blended family, the last missing link. All my adult life, I had been trying to patch the quilt together, but the more I tried, the worse it became. Every time I would feel Bruce had been slighted in any way, I would run to him and away from Alan. Instead of soothing and bringing us together, I was pushing the family into enemy camps. My son on one side, my husband on the other. The only solution would have been to choose. But how could I? How can you choose between two such great yet different loves? I did not want to live without either of them. I had not been able to comprehend my lack of control. It was another one of those situations in life I could not fix. If I had tried to interfere when Alan held Bruce's fist so tightly, I would have taken away their opportunity to resolve the problems in their relationship. It was not for me to solve. Only the two of them could, and they did. Keeping Secrets hit the New York Times bestseller list immediately. The book definitely signaled the beginning of an important new passage for me. It would completely change my direction as a person and alter the course of my life. Through this experience, I began to realize the importance of turning the arrows of ego away from me. Weeks before publication, I had a recurring nightmare that woke me night after night. I dreamed my father read the book, had a heart attack, and died. In the dream, I arrived at his funeral dressed in black, and as I walked to his coffin, the whole congregation hissed at me. What astounds me is how drastically I had underestimated my father. He not only allowed me to publicly tell our story, he even gave me his blessing. In many ways, I believe that was his way of making amends. If I could have found a way to tell my story without mentioning any of my family members, I would have. I was on a personal journey of truth. I wanted to discover how I had been affected by growing up within this disease. Through my writing, I was able to find compassion, not only for my father, but for myself as well. Letters came in by the thousands. I began to receive lecture requests. I had never spoken to large groups of people before. I wasn't sure I could do it. "Do it," Alan urged. He still supported me in every way. And ever since that awful night when he and Bruce had almost come to blows, our lives had changed drastically. I reveled in the joy I now felt at seeing Bruce and Alan interact on a new loving level. It was the answer to my prayers. Hospitals, rehab centers, women's groups, large corporations, and universities invited me to be their guest speaker. The first speaking engagement was the hardest. I allowed fear to undermine my abilities to deliver my message. I had been asked to speak at the opening of a new drug and alcohol rehab center in San Diego for an audience of 800 people. For days preceding the event, I read and reread my book, making index cards of bullet points and highlights. I made myself sick with worry. Armed with this lack of confidence, I walked on stage to inspire people. 1 hour and 36 index cards later, along with a lot of yawning from the audience, I realized I was bombing big time. After that first lecture, I realized I had approached the engagement incorrectly. Why did I have to try to remember my story, I asked myself. I could not forget what I already knew. I remembered the line from AA, "Keep it simple, stupid." All I had to do was tell the truth. My next speaking request was from another drug and alcohol rehab center in Mission Viejo, California. This time I would be speaking before a group of over 1,000 community leaders, interested members of the public, and recovering substance abusers. My approach was completely different. I meditated before the lecture, asking God to be with me and resolving that if one person was helped by my story, it would be a success. I had a beginning, an end, and some idea of where I wanted to be around the middle of my speech. As I walked through the large crowd towards the dais, I was overwhelmed by the reaction. The audience rose to their feet and clapped until I was settled on the stage, and I asked them to please be seated. I stood quietly before them for a moment, and in that space of time I picked up all the emotion in the room. These people were friends. "I am a grateful child of an alcoholic," I began. Speaking became the most powerful creative force I had ever experienced. When you tell the truth, it's mesmerizing for all involved, including yourself. When the audience realized I was speaking without notes, without any safety net, they became still and rapt. Interestingly, the freedom of extemporaneous speaking took away all stage fright. I believed I would be given the words, and that belief did not let me down. "I've been thinking about that conversation we had in Las Vegas, and I have an idea," Alan said one night. "I keep getting calls from people who want you to represent their products. So far nothing has impressed me, but there's a guy who wants to present his piece of fitness equipment, and he's willing to drive to the desert to meet with us. I've seen it already. I think we could really make something of it. You could inspire women by telling them that it's possible to stay in shape with a minimum of effort." "It's a V-toner," the man explained when he was sitting in the gazebo of our desert home. "It's for the upper body, shoulders, biceps, etc." I looked at the device. It looked like a large V with a steel-coiled spring at the base. I studied it for a while and asked, "Will this thing work for the inner thighs?" "Oh, sure," he said, "it's great for that area. I just thought if we highlighted the shoulder area, we might attract more interest." Alan and I played with the V-toner, looking at it from every angle, and we both decided that very day it should be renamed Thigh Master. Things happened quickly after that. The V-toner had been around for more than 20 years. The man who presented it to us had been one of its inventors. None of them understood anything about marketing and promotion. They had taken the V-toner to a company called Ovation for financing, and Ovation said they would be interested in manufacturing it if they could find a well-known celebrity to front the product. This is where I came in. After testing it for a few weeks, I noticed that my thighs had tightened to their youthful firmness. Best of all, I had been able to use the device while lying in bed watching television. "This is great," I told Alan. "Okay, let's go with it," he said enthusiastically. "I think it's a winner." Neither Alan nor I wanted me to merely front an item. Alan met with Ovation and told them what we wanted if we were to be involved. "Suzanne will do the commercials, which we'll write, and her picture will be used on the box and in advertisements. Suzanne's image will be linked with the item, and we'll do all the marketing and promotion, and for that we want equal ownership." We began the process of starting a new business. Within the first week, sales were skyrocketing. The 1-800 number was operating 24 hours a day. The Thigh Master became the #1 Christmas gift in 1987 and 1988. Everyone had to have one, even if they bought it as a joke. Thigh Master became ingrained in the American consciousness. It was an answer in the game Trivial Pursuit and was put into the dictionary. It became the highest-selling piece of fitness equipment in history at that time. We had done it. In 1991, Alan received a phone call from Tom Miller and Bob Boyette, mega-producers of such smash television hits as Happy Days. "We'd like to talk to Suzanne about starring in a new sitcom called Step by Step with Patrick Duffy." The timing was perfect, and within days I had entered into negotiations to co-star in this new fall entry for ABC television. ABC had an entirely new management and executive team since I had starred on Three's Company. I felt like I was returning from exile. Patrick was Frank, and I was Carol, a married couple with a blended family of 6 children. My 3 children hated sharing their house with his 3 kids. Parallels of my own life emerged, and the success of the show was guaranteed by a Friday night time slot geared to the kids across the country who were allowed to watch TV on ABC's TGIF. The difficult part of doing a sitcom was lack of time to do all the other things in which Alan and I were now involved. I was overwhelmed with the sacks of mail from keeping secrets and the flood of lecture requests. In addition, the Suzanne Somers Institute for the Effects of Addictions on Families was formed by Alan, myself, and Jerry Myers, the former director of NACOA, National Organization for Children of Alcoholics. I wanted to use my celebrity to lure the best and brightest minds in this area from all over America. Together, we gathered a traveling team of experts who created a medical protocol specifically designed for those people surviving in the hell that is created by living with an alcoholic, addict, or abuser. Somehow, Alan and I kept a balance. We scheduled rest and vacation times and had an agreement that we would treat these as sacred. In September 1991, Bruce married Caroline. We set up a beautiful, huge white tent in front of our beach house, the same house in which Alan and I had been married years before. I never knew I could be as happy as I was when I watched Bruce escort Caroline to the altar and commit his life to her. Now our house had become a family haven, Bruce and Caroline coming for weekends as well as Leslie and her new husband Frank. Stephen came all the way from Europe to attend Bruce's wedding. It meant a lot to all of us, especially Bruce. It was the first time we had met Olivia, Stephen's girlfriend. She was a delicate, wistful beauty with elegant features and skin like a rose petal. "Is this getting serious?" Alan asked Stephen. "Getting?" Stephen replied. "I'm going to marry her." "We're very happy for both of you," I told Stephen honestly. It was our way now. I only said things that I felt to be true. As a result, Stephen and I began to connect. I realized I had never needed to pretend my feelings all along. It was honesty that bonded us. Acting false had kept us disconnected. All the pieces had fallen into place. Today, I realized that love takes time and patience and that growth takes desire and work. All events have purpose. The job in my life is to understand the meaning. Why else would I feel the need to walk back through the hills and valleys of my life? The details really aren't all that important. Yet there is no way I could understand the lessons without looking back at my teachers. Now I am happier than I have ever been in my life. Sometimes I feel I could burst with joy. My relationship with Alan has become exquisite. After 30 years together, we are connected, joined at the hip, our lives intertwined like branches of a vine. He is my greatest friend and my most trusted ally. We watch our children and grandchildren grow with pride and also with the same fear as a mother bird who watches her babies fly from the nest. What matters is their ability to flap their wings and soar rather than fall to the ground. But my happiness comes from a place deeper than all of this, because I am now happy with myself and who I am. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but today I am aware that forgiveness heals, that blame is wasted energy, that awareness of each moment of life is precious, and I don't want to waste any of it. I want to be present, in the moment, and accept all that happens to me as the gift that it is, and to grow and evolve into the best person I can be. When I finished writing this book, I was in my dressing room backstage, sitting on a stool, facing a large mirror, surrounded by the lights that allow me to put on my makeup and transform myself into her. It is a process that takes 2 hours to complete. It starts with a long, hot bath with lavender oils. Then I wash my hair and stand under the shower to rinse. While drying my hair, I start to think about what I want to accomplish while performing this show. I want to make the people feel something. Somewhere in a song and somewhere in my talk, it must be so raw and so honest that the intimacy of the words or lyrics makes us all squirm with that private kind of discomfort. That is my job. When my hair is dry, I brush it all up high on the back of my head, twist it from left to right into a mop on the top, and anchor it with a pin or two. While I highlight my lashes with mascara and brush my cheeks with pink, I am thinking about accountability, caring, decency, and love. If we all were accountable, and were the best people we could be, our example would inspire the next generation. There is so much anger and misunderstanding in families today. Not just families like mine who have worked through the entanglements of blending, but all those connected by blood who keep up their defensive walls of non-communication. They never get to know one another because they never know themselves. But interacting with total honesty is the most tremendous personal gift we share. The reward is contentment. The work it has taken to have a better understanding of who I am allows me to relax and enjoy. There are no more demons now. Life seems simpler. There is no competition. There is no race to win. I'm just living my life my way and loving it. Because I'm aware, I'm able to truly enjoy each day and every event, big or small. The smell of my husband's skin, the twinkle in Bruce's eye, the way Leslie makes me laugh, when Stephen lets down his guard. All these precious moments add up to peace and satisfaction. Yes, this is what I'll tell my audience, I say to myself as I finish putting on her lips, big, red, and full. I push one diamond earring into my right earlobe, and then the other into my left. I reach for my gown, black satin, long and tight. Nothing is really bad, I think to myself. So all of life's experiences are lessons from which to learn and grow. We each have a choice, to be a victim, to say, why me? Why do bad things happen to me? Or to look at it from another point of reference. How can I grow? What can I learn? What is the opportunity being presented? I pull on one white opera-length glove and button 5 small pearls at the wrist. Then I pull the left glove on and button it. As I look at myself, front and back, in the floor-length mirror in the dressing room, I can see that I am ready. I am now her, the part of myself that gives me such enjoyment. You go out there, I tell myself, and you tell them these things. Let them see the possibilities. Where you come from is not where you have to stay. It's our only life right now. Make it the best. Be the best. Live your dreams. And know yourself. Be happy. I spray myself with Chanel No. 5, behind my ears, in my cleavage. Let's go, Alan, I'm ready. I walk down the long hallway. There are people lining the sides, but I don't see them right now. I'm in focus. My heart is beating with excitement and privilege. I continue across the open courtyard. The air is fresh. I like the feel of the black satin against my skin. I go up the 6 steps to the stage level. I hear musicians warming up. I'm saying hello to people, but I am still in focus. The backstage is dark. Alan steadies me in my high-heeled black satin Manolos to keep me from tripping on the floor cables. My eyes adjust to the dark. I hear the buzz, a low roar from behind the curtain. This is a good audience, I think to myself. I can tell by their tone. I meditate behind curtain ropes. I speak to the voice within. Together we can do anything, I say to someplace deep within me. I visualize my body filling with liquid gold, entering through a cavity at the top of my head. It fills my limbs, my torso, my neck, my face, my entire head. I feel strength. I am not alone. I can feel it. I see Glenn pick up his horn. I smile at him. My band swells with sounds of music. Go get him, Alan whispers into my ear. Ladies and gentlemen, Universal Amphitheater presents Miss Suzanne Somers.
Miss Suzanne Somers.
This has been a Random House Audiobooks presentation.